4, 5, 6, 7. Missing Alan.
About 10 seconds.
Pretty sure Alan knows we have a meeting tonight.
So
Sure he does.
And you're good to go.
okay, are we ready? Ooh, it's 7 o'clock. All right, good evening, everyone. And welcome to the June 24th, 2020 special meeting of the Chapel Hill Town Council. We have 12 items for discussion on our agenda this evening, including a joint resolution from our own council. Also on the agenda are updates from the town's continuing response to the COVID-19 crisis, a couple of budget items, 4 land use items, and we'll be making appointments at the end of the meeting to 4 different boards to fill some gaps that we have until we can do more reappointments and things in the fall. But first, because of these new ways in which we're meeting, we're going to have a roll call vote. So as I call your name, you'll please unmute yourself and say present, if you would, please. So Mayor Pro Tem Michael Parker.
Present.
Councilmember Jess Anderson.
Present.
Councilmember Ellen Bointsey. We will come back to him. Councilmember Hong Bin Gu.
Present.
Councilmember Tai Nguyen.
Present.
Councilmember Amy Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Stegman.
Here.
And Mayor Pam Heminger, I'm here as well, and we will announce when Alan comes and joins us on this meeting.
He needs the link. Amy, could you resend him the link, please?
Okay, we will get him there. All right, we're going to start tonight with a resolution for the whole town council, and we do have members of the public signed up to speak, but we'll go through a bit of this first. Welcome, Alan. You need to tell us that you're present, Councilmember Alan Bointsey.
Yes, I'm present. My apologies. I
No worries.
didn't get the link until just now.
Thank you for being with us. All right. On June 3rd, following the death of George Floyd, the whole Chapel Hill Town Council issued a joint statement which reaffirmed our commitment to ensuring public safety, public health, and a community where all people are free to thrive and to live their lives without fear. To achieve these goals, we must do more to eradicate the racial bias and structural racism that exists in our own institutions. Tonight, we join together again to support a joint resolution that puts our commitment into action. Because this resolution is lengthy and thorough, we won't be reading it in its entirety tonight. Instead, I've asked council members Bointsey and Stegman to make a short statement. Then we'll hear from the public, and then we'll come back and talk about our resolution. So I'm not sure who wanted to be first between Councilmember Stegman and Mr. Bointsey. Go ahead.
I'll start.
Thank you.
Black Lives Matter. If the killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, and countless others has taught us anything, it has taught us and shown us that it is long past time for action. All levels of government must be about the work of changing policies that disproportionately discriminate against people of color and violate their basic constitutional and human rights. We are fortunate to have a police chief who has taken a progressive approach to public safety. At the same time, policing is an institution that has rightly been called into question for its historic, racist roots and enduring violence against Black and brown bodies. We realize that what is needed is a reimagination of public safety in our community by re-examining and reinvesting in community resources. Our first steps in this reimagination includes the following immediate steps: prohibiting chokeholds as a policing tactic, ending all regulatory traffic stops, which involve low-level, non-moving violations that do not address public safety, directing CHPD's policies to authorize deadly force only when there is clear and convincing evidence of imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, and to include clear accountability for officers violating department policies. The council also requests information needed to inform a transparent process for long-term change. including but not limited to the following: current staffing levels of officers in the CHPD, the activities of our crisis unit, and a listing of local ordinances that may criminalize poverty. I turn it over to my colleague, Councilmember Stegman.
The council will commit to the following actions. Direct the council committee to clarify the charge of the Community Police Advisory Committee and the Justice and Action Committee. Institute a semi-annual presentation of Chapel Hill Police Department data. Engage with the school board and county partners to compile data and explore alternatives to SROs. Longer term, we are committed to a process that will reimagine our town budget and reallocate resources in a way that reflects our community's commitment to justice and equity. We will direct the manager to work with and fund community and faith-based groups to organize and hold a series of community-wide listening sessions. We will also direct the manager to create a process that engages a community task force, which will consider and make actionable recommendations on a range of issues related to public safety, including but not limited to the right sizing of our police, reallocating resources as necessary, including from CHPD, and coordinating with the county and other jurisdictional partners to increase investments in programs that keep communities healthy and safe. It has taken us a while to get to this place, and we are fully aware that even with these next steps, we do not get to the place where we want and you want us to be. This is a collective step, and we are committed to seeing fundamental change with you. We look forward to working together with you to realize a new, bold vision of public safety. Thank you.
Thank you both. I will come back after we hear from our public and I share a few more comments about working together and to move us all forward. So Mr. Parker, you're going to help us with public input, and a friendly reminder, we welcome your input. We ask you to abide by the 3 minutes. I know it's a little difficult with the transferring you in this virtual world and transferring you out. So we will work with us and we will be patient. We want to hear from you. Mr. Parker, you're going to call 2 names?
Yes, so Amy can transfer 2 at a time to minimize the time between speakers. The first is Hannah Schanzer, followed by Emil Charles.
Hi, thank you for allowing the opportunity to speak. I'm one of the people that gave comment on the last call, and I've emailed a few times. I haven't, had the chance to look over this resolution, so I don't really have comment on it since you just stated it. I mean, it sounds like these are promising steps, but I do take issue with the fact that this wasn't available to look at online beforehand, and no notice was put out that you would be announcing this resolution tonight, kind of not really drawing attention to the fact that you were doing this. The town of Carrboro, the last time I emailed them, emailed me before their town council meeting with the resolution in PDF form to look over so that residents could give informed comment on the subject matter. So I just further going forward for transparency, I think that's an area that you could have improved upon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Emil Charles, followed by Trinity Casimir. And if I may take the liberty of congratulating Mr. Charles on being declared a town hero, congratulations.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me here tonight. Dear Madam Mayor and Town Council members, my name is Emil Charles, and again, I speak to you as a member and advocate for the Chapel Hill community. While attendance and speakers at this meeting may be lower and the influx of emails to your inbox have slowed, this does not mean we are still not demanding change and demanding better from all of you. At the last Town Council meeting, you heard from many community members asking you to defund and dismantle the police. And you have not made any previous attempts until this resolution now that I wasn't able to see beforehand to show intention of that. As you create this resolution for community approaches for improved racial equity and public safety, let us not overlook arguably the most important part of this: community. Little to no information about this resolution was made public before this meeting. It is unclear who was able to add their voices to this resolution, And it is even more unclear how you as a governing body of Chapel Hill will be held accountable to this resolution and what is to come from it. Also, let's not forget that you may not necessarily represent all of us. Many of us as citizens do not see our own identities and demographics represented accurately or well enough on this council. We elected you to office. Please listen to us. We hope to continue to have you in our leadership positions. And if those are not filled, we aim to find someone who can fill those. In terms of what needs to be addressed in our town in respect to racial equity and public safety, let us look at some local data. In Orange County, 12% of the population identifies as Black, yet in this group, the same group makes up nearly 40% of the COVID cases. Similarly, Black people make up more than 50% of those who are affected by homelessness in this county. This needs to be addressed. Why are our Black citizens not being protected as well as any other? This is not racially equitable. In the CHCCS school systems, Black students are more than 10 times likely to be suspended than their white counterparts. Why are Black students being punished more than any other student? This is not racially equitable. In the same school district, none of our high schools meet the national recommendation for student social worker ratio or the student psychologist ratio. Why do our students not have the proper support and mental health resources they need? This does not support public safety. In the historically Black neighborhoods and communities in Chapel Hill, property taxes have gone up more than 500% since 2000. In the same areas, student rentals have gone up more than 300%. Why are Black residents and long-term citizens being systematically pushed out of their homes and communities? This is not racially equitable. This is only one of the few of the issues that need to be addressed, but I urge you to look deeper into your own research into what our community really needs. Earlier this week, I was able to see the monument erected for the Chapel Hill 9 on Franklin Street. I appreciate this monument, but I'm asking that if you feel this is enough or even close to enough for racial justice, reparations, and equity in our community, please reconsider where these ideas are coming from. It is not. The following list of demands by no means encapsulates everything, but are what I hope to see come from local community reform. Condemn and call an end to police brutality locally and nationally. Honor and demand justice for Black folks who have been murdered by the police. Dismantle and divest from the police department. Reallocate funds from the police back to the community in areas like education, housing, and healthcare. Invest in community education programs in and outside of school for Black, Indigenous, and POC populations. Demand the Board of Education actively incorporate anti-racist agendas into those school curriculums. Demilitarize the schools. Hire more Black and brown faculty and staff in schools, especially in administrative positions. Invest in affordable housing initiatives. And support and fund Black artists, Black-owned businesses, and Black citizens. In respect to the budget,
Your time's up. Can you wrap up for us, please?
Yes. In respect to the budget that is being voted on later in this meeting, do not approve this, vote no. Redesign a budget that better provides and support all members of the community and deconstructs the ties and practices that support white supremacy that are greatly present in our town. That is your duty as local leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, you're muted.
Trinity Casimir, followed by Rachel Coleman.
Hi, my name is Trinity Casimir. Thank you so much for having me. I want to draw particular attention to the part of the resolution that sort of discusses actions being taken in terms of reallocating funding. We wanted to encourage us to take note of where those funds are coming out of within the police department and the standards that we are holding the people receiving new funds to. In the process of defunding the police, we're advocating for specialized, trained public servants that play a very specific role in our town and aid in our long-term transition to community without crime. This can include responding to crimes rooted more in violence than need-based crimes. And upon further consideration, we should consider if people attempting to fill their needs is even a crime in the traditional sense. I believe our goals can be accomplished through reallocation of funds as long as they are the right funds. In all honesty, I don't know a lot about where the funding to Chapel Hill PD actually goes, but blindly cutting their budget without attention to the amount of personnel in the department, the amount of tasks the police are assigned, et cetera, could leave us with an overworked, underpaid force that still holds immense influence and ultimately does more harm. So we're asking for a strategic defunding of the police in addition to a restructuring of our public safety model, which leads me to my next point. When we consider funding alternatives to police response, I want to encourage us as a community to be mindful that these roles don't end up perpetuating inequality and violence, ultimately taking up the characteristics we currently criticize the police for. When Elijah McClain was murdered, it was a paramedic who administered the lethal dose of ketamine. When Gabriel Fernandez was murdered, much of the responsibility was attributed to neglectful social workers. These examples are not isolated incidents, but evidence of a long pattern of institutionalized racism in healthcare and social services. So when we advocate for increasing the implementation of EMTs and social workers, we're not merely shuffling responsibilities for who answers the call. We are prioritizing care and compassion over our interests in order and control. If we implement policing alternatives, I would like to see further research and discourse as to the ways in which education, healthcare, and social work can avoid the pitfalls of racialized violence and be held accountable for their service to the community. Funding community resources is an investment, and we want to spend our money as wisely as possible. The best place to start is with a concerted effort to consult the communities who will be the most affected in changes in policing. We don't have to theorize about what people need or what we consider to be a logical response. We can instead put that energy into asking what they want in terms of public safety and getting a concrete answer. While I admire and commend Minneapolis' answer, certain residents, particularly low-income Black residents, did not feel that enough of an effort was made to communicate the logistics of a new public safety organization or take their interests into account. Communication and collaboration are good principles to exercise in all of our policy changes. Many of us live in affluent suburbs with access to housing, health care, and educational resources. Therefore, we often have the privilege of living in a world without police. Because of this, I do not feel it is appropriate for us to unilaterally make decisions on behalf of those who do not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Rachel Coleman, followed by Maggie Blunk.
Hello, everybody. So I don't know how many of you know about this, but there are a number of ways that white supremacy shows up in our organizational structure. And there's a website called Dismantling Racism that was written by Tema Okun that I'm happy to share with everybody, that really recognizes how during the processes, much like this town council has done, implement and further continue harm of white supremacist patterns and practices. So a couple of these we saw in the way that this resolution was not shared, the way that there's a sense of urgency around getting town budgets done and certain deadlines, which all have to do with how we are upholding power and keeping things in the same status quo. And like you have all said with this resolution, the status quo is no longer working for all of us. And so I wanna not repeat what Emil has said and some of the other people who've spoken and really eloquently put together what needs to be done and what you have mostly adopted into this resolution. But I want us to think critically about the process of how we get to that answer. So who on here has been on a school board in their career? I know the mayor has, great. And one of the great teachings that comes from our educators is critical thinking. And you don't just get the right answer in our math test, you gotta show your work. And you did not show your work in this process. We are the teachers checking over your English paper to give you the edits. And although you handed in the right paper, we didn't see what we needed to see. You did not show us how you got there. There was no peer review process that made us feel like we are in this together. So what I would like to see us going forward is more in community involvement in these processes, listening to our Black and Brown citizens of this of this town, sorry. And we need to be doing that the whole way through. You can't just have a couple boards like CPAC where the cameras and the microphones are turned off for those who attend. I was on a CPAC meeting 2 weeks ago, I think, and we only got to ask questions through a chat box that was not open to the public. So these are not ways to build democracy. And we also see in our country at large, democracy is crumbling around us. We know that certain people in power are not upholding it in the way we would like to see many of the Chapel Hill citizens who probably voted differently than who's in office. And if we are going down this direction of not being democratic in this one small way, it's a snowball effect that we will no longer have community input and everything out in the open for all of us to see. Within dismantling racism, there's a number of things that we could do. Challenge perfectionism, challenge our defensiveness when learning, challenge our sense of urgency, a sense of objectivity, power hoarding, and this fear of open conflict. If we implement these in the practices of how this town council functions, then we are working towards being anti-racist, not only in the answer we give at the end of the test, but the work we show on that test paper. And I expect to see that out of our town council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maggie Blunk, followed by Lindsay Ayling.
Hi, Good evening, council members, and hello to my former soccer coach, Pam Heminger. My name's Maggie Blunk. I was born and raised in Chapel Hill. I currently work here at a nonprofit as well as coach at Chapel Hill High School. Frankly, I just wanted to say that I'm very disappointed to see that after 5 hours of public comment at the June 10th meeting, that the town council has not proposed any cuts whatsoever to the police budget, especially considering that in the same meeting, the council was expressing their support for the Weavers Grove community. I don't understand how you can tell the community that affordable housing is of the utmost importance when it receives so much less funding than policing. The resolution at the beginning of the meeting, although to echo what other people have said, I have not been able to read it in full yet, sounds promising, but a more illustrative step that the council can take right now to prove your dedication to racial justice would be immediate reallocation of police funds to affordable housing or to education to address the achievement gap. Those are things that we don't need to wait for down the road, that you can do right now to show the community how important it is to you, instead of creating a commission to look into it or to report on it later down the road. $14 million for the Chapel Hill Police Department, and possibly more for many of these reforms that you cite, is too much when the town no longer even funds community watch meetings with the Northside community. It's too much when there are still disparities in enforcement 5 years after the Orange County bias-free policing recommendations were adopted, and when CPAC, let alone town residents, don't even have an itemized report of how town funds are spent on policing. Frankly, the town council is just upholding the status quo. We're not the progressive city that we claim to be, and you are not serving your citizens. You heard us for 5 hours, and you'll probably hear us for another 5 hours. You may think that you can just sidestep this with talking about things that we might do further on down the line, but we know that all of you guys are up for re-election. It might not be until November 2021, but we're still gonna be here and we'll remember. So it's really time to listen to the town and hear what people are saying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindsay Ayling, followed by Mary Alta Fetterman.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Ayling. I am from Minneapolis originally, and that is a city with a racist police force and a liberal governing board that gave itself a lot of pats on the back and congratulated itself on making reforms to their police department. And we all know how that turned out. So I would like to ask you to, instead of taking half measures, defund and disband the police. I would like to add that although a lot of people claim that the Chapel Hill Police are progressive, there was a scandal very recently where one of their members was also in the Three Percenters militia, a right-wing extremist group whose members marched with Nazis in Charlottesville. And that police officer had a 3%er tattoo on his arm that was very large. Members of the Chapel Hill Police Force would have seen it. They should have known this person is a member of a racist extremist group that has a history of violence. And yet, it wasn't until activists posted his photo online that Chief Blue, well, originally said that he would just ask the officer to cover up his tattoo from then on. And after another wave of outrage erupted, put him on paid leave for a while. So when I think about that situation, I wonder how many other police officers who are his friends on the force share his violent, racist, right-wing ideology. I also want to add that on at least 3 occasions, white supremacist groups have carried weapons at demonstrations in the city of Chapel Hill. And even though that's illegal, Chief Blue has not acted to arrest them. He actually gave them protection. On a couple occasions, the police didn't even come out and just left it to me and my friends to watch the violent racists to make sure they didn't shoot anyone. On a different occasion, the police were out, but they were actually being aggressive towards the counter protesters. And when people pointed out that one of the racists had a gun, they just calmly walked him back to his car. Even though the town of Chapel Hill is not on school property, so it's not a felony to carry guns, it is actually still legal to carry guns at demonstrations, but that law seems to be only enforced against anti-racists and not against neo-Nazis and members of white supremacist groups. So to wrap up, I just want to say that there's some fundamental problems with the police force. They absolutely have been complicit in beating anti-racist protesters at UNC in order to protect Nazis, and I don't want to see this police force continue by any means. Please defund and abolish it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Alta Fetterman, followed by Anna Richards.
Hi, I'm Mary Alta. I use she and they pronouns. I also am a lifelong resident of Chapel Hill. I now live in Durham, but I lived there for the first 22 years of my life. I don't want to take up too much time. I mainly want to echo the comments that Trinity and Emil made earlier with very concrete asks of this council. I also want to just name that this resolution is really clearly well thought out, clearly thoughtful, but how many of the points made in this resolution will actually be possible without a radical change in the budget, which so far has not been changed in any meaningful way since the last town council meeting, where for 5 hours people asked for a budget change. These kinds of really nice things on paper don't actually mean anything and won't hold any ground unless the allocation of funds and town money and taxpayer money back them up. So I would just ask you to consider that all of these thoughts, while well-intentioned, really need legs in order to do any good in Chapel Hill. And I also want to echo what the last speaker was saying. It's my cat's tail, sorry. I want to think about like how possible it actually is to keep reforming and changing something that, as you all noted in the resolution, was actually built on white supremacy and built because of white supremacy. There are only so many reforms we can make before we have to drastically reconsider what this institution is doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anna Richards, followed by Mackenzie Kwok.
Okay, great.
Hello.
Hi, evening, Mayor and Council. First of all, I would like to say that I know this is the last meeting of the year, your last planned regular meeting. And so from that standpoint, I'm happy to see that the resolution made it to the agenda today. And there are some things that I heard in there that are really encouraging. The commitment to not increase officer positions until community input has been received and that the task force work is complete. I want to see a reordering of priorities and funding, but I do want to see that done in a thoughtful way. And I'm hopeful that the work that has been laid out here to happen over the summer will help us do that in a way that is thoughtful and purposeful. I applaud the timeline through September, but I'm hoping that some things can be implemented in a more streamlined fashion once we start getting some of this information back. I'm of the belief that budgets can be changed and funds can be reallocated. And so I don't see that we are bound necessarily by the fact that you are going to pass a budget today. And I would say that if we can figure out creatively how to make those changes, that together as a community we can. I also want to take just a second to talk about the NAACP's effort over the last few weeks to come up with an agenda for safety transformation. There are steps in here that align with yours in terms of discontinuing use of force and looking at transparency, making sure that we get rid of chokeholds and that we have and review records of police officers that have history, and that we're making sure that we're not hiring people that are affiliated with groups who are antithetical really to equal justice for all people, and that we know who those are, that we have clear hiring policies and practices, that we make sure that we are giving the community the investment that it needs to be able to more adequately provide for public safety. And we have a long list of those things that include housing, counseling, mental health, and we'll make this available to members of council after tonight, because it is very extensive in terms of where we see those changes happening. And we believe that there are affirmative steps that the town can do immediately. And I think I understand that some of those things will be taken up, like changes to ordinances and things like that in the city that criminalize poverty, and that we can work to make sure those things happen. We are seeking public input on our recommendations, and we're going to have a community conversation this Saturday afternoon at 4. It'll be virtual, of course, but we're really wanting to hear from the community about how people are impacted. Good intentions, and this I think is a thing that we have to keep foremost, is that progressive actions, good intentions, we really are great, and that we really have to look at outcomes. And unfortunately, our outcomes today are still not where we want them to be. So we do have work to do here in Chapel Hill. And I think that in terms of accountability, the community is watching. We're watching. We want to be involved. We want to hold the council accountable to the things that you've stated there. And I'm hoping that we can move faster in terms of implementation, so that we can move forward and transform this community safety into the kinds of outcomes that we want for everybody in Chapel Hill.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much for working with us, and we'll please send out your list, and we'll be in touch.
Mackenzie Kwok, followed by Amelia Covington.
Hi, so I also don't want to take up too much time, but I'd like to echo the sentiments of everybody who spoke before me, and really just emphasize the need for defunding the police. And I would just like to add on to Anna by saying that in regards to limitations on the use of force, they've not been effective in reducing harm to Black and Brown communities. So we saw chokehold bans did not save Eric Garner or George Floyd. And we saw Breonna Taylor die in her home when warrants are imperative in due process of implicating people in supposed crimes. And so I just would really like to encourage you all to please, like someone before me was saying, the progressive ideals that we propose cannot be accomplished without instead reallocating funds into community services and community safety, like housing, like food security, like shelter and resources for victims of domestic abuse and anti-trans violence and things like that. So again, I don't want to waste more time by echoing things that people said before me, but please just, I do not think, and there you see proof in other places that defunding the police is the direction that we are headed and the thing that we need to do now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amelia Covington, and that is the last person that I am aware of who has signed up.
Dolores Bailey raised her hand. So if you like, please.
Okay. There she is. Okay.
All right. Hi, I'm Amelia, she, her, hers. I've lived in Chapel Hill practically my entire life. And I also attended the last special city council meeting, and the resounding demand from the residents there that spoke was to defund the police. And I want to remind you all, as you know, people have already said, public safety doesn't look like policing. It looks like investments in communities of color, particularly Black communities, decided by those same communities. You know, as Mackenzie just said, we can't community police or reform our way out of this. It's been tried and has failed many, many times. But we can do is divert those funds to other resources. And those decisions should be made, as I said before, by our communities of color. So I encourage you to continue responding and reconsidering the budget. And, you know, I will keep you guys accountable to make those steps to defund Chapel Hill Police. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dolores Bailey, followed by George Barrett.
And then Paris Miller also had her.
Yeah, I know, I got it.
George, are you going to speak? I don't see Dolores in yet.
Oh, I can if I was
Thank
waiting
you.
for Dolores.
Go ahead and we'll get Dolores in.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Can you hear me?
Oh, well, now she is. Okay.
I'm sorry, I was muted, reading to myself.
Okay, well, let's let Dolores speak. Let's speak to us.
And you want to start from the beginning?
Okay, ready? I am ready to start.
Go.
Madam Mayor and council members, thank you for hearing me tonight. My name is Dolores Bailey. I'm the Executive Director of Empowerment Incorporated, a community organization that has worked in this Chapel Hill community for more than 24 years, working on bringing community, policing, town council, and other resources together so that it works for those marginalized communities in Chapel Hill, North Side, Pine Knolls, Chase Park, Elliott Woods. I appreciate the collaboration that created this resolution. I too believe it's necessary for change to continue and start at the top, at this level of leadership. Empowerment is one of those community organizations that has worked for years to bring community and police together through our community watch/outreach meetings. I believe that those community meetings, which have been placed on hold, are the place where conversation, community conversation, should begin about this resolution. I believe it's time to look at the good and throw out the bad of our police department. I believe there is a restructuring that can make the work of our police department more effective. For instance, more employees on the crisis unit so that police officers dressed with guns don't have to handle homeless situations that don't warrant police activity. Change is necessary. The time is now. I believe we need to start with this resolution and lots of community involvement. Empowerment and all we serve are ready to be a part of this change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. George Barrett, followed by Paris Miller.
Good evening, everyone. I want to start by especially lifting up the voices of the young people who have spoke today and who have been speaking previously and also have been leading this movement, especially our young queer people of color and our young queer Black people. I want to first say that, and I want to say something that's that friends have said to me during this time. You are seen, you are heard, you are valued, and you are loved. And I just want to put that out forward because what they're saying is basically everything that I was going to say. I'm not going to repeat what I said last time about defunding the police. My stance has not changed. I think also what we're hearing right now, what you are hearing right now is a lack of trust, especially a lack of trust in reform. There has been talk about reform for years, but that has not done anything to change the violence on Black bodies. And so if we really look at history, we know that reform is not enough. We must move forward. And with this resolution, I think it is a good beginning. It is a good first step in the right direction, but I'm going to push you to move even further, explicitly talk about defunding the police and reallocating money from the police budget into community resources and into communities of color, Black and brown communities, especially because policing is a symptom of a larger system of white supremacy and oppression, and it is all interconnected. So we must show that we believe in this, and we must show that we want to make this change by moving dollars away from the police budget. I thank you for your time. That's all I'm going to say, and appreciate the time I was able to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Paris Miller, followed by Maya Donald.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. My name is Paris Miller, and I'm a resident of the Northside community here in Chapel Hill. I am also a board member of Empowerment Inc., and I'm also on the board of the Marion Cheek Jackson Center. I am currently serving as the vice chair of CPAC, the Chapel Hill Community Policing Advisory Committee, alongside the chair, Josh Romero. Josh is also here with us this evening, but I'll be speaking on our behalf. Josh and I are excited to be serving our community in this capacity. For context, Tuesday afternoon, we held an emergency meeting to discuss CPAC's role in participating in the conversations around what policing will look like moving forward in our community, as well as how we want to engage the community outside of the committee itself. And during that meeting, it came to our attention that council was working on some sort of resolution related to policing, and yet CPAC was not consulted in any way. So we implore council to and expect that council will include us in the future conversations regarding policing and community safety, because this is our charge as a committee. And we are here to support the town, community, and council, but we can only do so when we are included and are able to include additional community stakeholders along the way. Yesterday, we sent a letter to council and the mayor about these expectations. We've yet to receive a response from anyone, but we hope that changes as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for sending the letter, and we will get back to you. It's just been a little overwhelming, but thank you.
Okay, Maya Donald is next, and I do not see any other raised hands at the moment.
Hi there. My name is Maya. I've spoken a couple times before. I'm here to say that I continue to be concerned about the funding of the Chapel Hill Police Department, aside from the resolution that was read earlier this evening, which, as I hope you can understand, comes across as something of a last-minute effort. We haven't seen any committed effort to deal with the racism of policing. This past month, the council has had a huge opportunity to put its money where its mouth is. You've been given a chance to take action, but you haven't taken the steps to strategically defund the police. You haven't reached out to the community, and you haven't made your process transparent. So I'm asking you to vote no on the proposed budget and take the time to reallocate the funds going to the police intentionally. As others have stated tonight, the Chapel Hill Police Department is not an exception to the racism of policing, just because we are a so-called progressive town. I want to echo what Trinity said earlier about creating meaningful alternatives outside of a punitive system. I want to ask you to listen to what your constituents are telling you. and please defund and disband the Chapel Hill Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe that is everybody who wished.
E. McManus, I think, is here.
Where?
Yes. Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is McGinnis, and I've lived in Chapel Hill for over 8 years. And like a lot of other people, I just want to keep it short and brief and emphasize pretty much what other people have said tonight. So I think that this push towards racial equity and justice by the town has some good intentions in it, but like others have mentioned, we cannot dismiss disparity and outcomes. I also believe budgets are not set in stone and should reflect what the people of the town both want and need. As you know, the public has asked to defund and dismantle the police. Our stances have not changed, and we want more than what the resolutions have offered. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Okay, Michael, is that?
As far as I can tell, it is, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to council. I just want to do, I do want to say thank you to the entire council for caring so deeply about these issues and for giving all your input. Also want to express our appreciation to the hard work of council members Boyncey, Stegman, Anderson, and Ryan for putting all of those ideas and words together. They've been working diligently and getting this because we knew this was our last meeting until we take a break. So we wanted to get that out there. And I also want to thank our town manager, Maurice Jones, and Deputy Town Manager Flo Miller, and our Chief Chris Blue for their hard work to support us in doing all of this work, and the entire community. They support the community. We come together in protest and speaking out and seeing what's happening nationally and reflecting back how that looks in our own community. And I just want to reiterate the commitment that the town council has and the Chapel Hill Police Department, all members of our town staff, for fostering trust, respect, human dignity, and equality for everyone. I know that there's more work to be done. We're trying to set a path for doing that work. We're eager to get these conversations started, and we're determined to move forward together. If the council passes this resolution, I want to share that we were planning on sending it back out to everyone who has written to us. And while we understand that we weren't able to make this resolution available earlier, we've been trying to take a thoughtful approach and have something that we could all support that had a framework for helping us move forward. We will be including community voices. Again, it is a framework, and we will get the work started. So, Mr. Boyncey or Ms. Stegman, is there a motion?
I move to adopt the resolution. Is there a particular name we have for it, R1?
It is listed out there on developing new community approaches to improving racial equity and public safety in Chapel Hill.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Boyncey, second by Ms. Stegman. I will need a roll call vote again, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Very definitely aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boyncey.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
The mayor says aye as well. Motion is unanimous, and thank you again for working on this. And I look forward to all of us getting started on making these changes. Okay, now we have time for public input. Oh, Ms. Gu?
Yeah, can I make a comment?
Okay.
Well, I think I really appreciate the comments that I just made in response to our resolution, and I think that it's very important for, and I want to echo that it's very important for us to make sure that all the parties of our town are being involved. I would say, especially the communities who have been marginalized or have not been involved in this process. I think that in order for us to really move forward on this, I want to make sure that everyone are being included. They are all part of this, a part of this process. I think I agree with some of the commentators in saying that the process is not only the results, the process is almost as important as the results. So I want to make sure that I have heard comments from multiple people from different parts of the town and the community. I think we're all committed to move the community forward toward the justice and toward eradicating the police brutality, to make sure that there is a different imagination of our police force. But I want to make sure that all the communities that in our town are being involved, especially the ones that are marginalized and have not been involved in this process in the past.
Thank you. Okay, I was going to wait for announcements, but I think it's important to make this announcement here that tomorrow, the town of Chapel Hill is partnered with Orange County Local Reentry Coalition and our neighboring municipalities in hosting the Hearing Impacted Voices, a moderated panel discussion on inequality, policing, and injustice. The event is free and open to the community, and information on how you register for this meeting is on our town calendar or Facebook page. We're very eager to get started, like I said, with these conversations, and our James Williams has helped put this together, and we encourage people to attend. So that's up there. All right, now it's time for items, public comment on items not on the printed agenda. We actually have two petitions. First, if we're going to take those petitions, we have one from our own staff that's actually asking us to pass a resolution. I think Laura Selmer is presenting that for us, so we can call her in to do that. That would be great. Laura, you're muted. There you are.
Hello, sorry about that.
You're good.
Good evening. I'm here to request your authorization to move forward on our Franklin Street project. We are now at the point where we have received DOT support and have identified a product to use to achieve our goal of lane channeling for increased pedestrian space. And I need the authorization to move forward with a sole source purchasing for this product. There's only one company that offers this product type, and we would like to move forward to purchase as soon as possible so we are ready to implement.
Okay. Council members, are there clarifying questions?
I'm assuming we're just moving it tonight and not receiving and referring, correct?
Correct. We're trying to move this evening.
So
Okay.
moved unless there's other comment.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Anderson, second by Mr. Parker. Are there any other comments? I know that staff is working diligently to get this done as quickly as possible. Okay, I need a roll call vote again, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Voinsey.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And Mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much. All right. I believe there was another petition.
Yes, from Norma Safransky and Sharon Bagtel.
Okay. Thank you, Laura.
Unmuting myself. Hi, I'm Norma Safransky, longtime resident of Chapel Hill since the early 70s. And I just want to first say thank you very much for giving us time to present this resolution to the council. So I'm here to ask the Chapel Hill Town Council to approve a resolution endorsing House Resolution 763 in the House of Representatives, Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which addresses reduction of carbon emissions through a carbon pricing and dividend to citizens. And we met recently with the Environmental Advisory Board of Chapel Hill, and they endorsed the resolution. So we're here to present this to you. And thanks so much for your time. So over to you, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. We're asking you tonight to join over 100 municipalities across the country in showing support for the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, currently a bill in the House of Representatives. As citizens, we believe the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is an effective and politically viable way to bring down our country's carbon emissions, which will in turn improve health, save lives, and stimulate the economy. So here's what we're asking you to support in a nutshell. The Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is a bipartisan bill that places a fee on fossil fuels at the source, the mine, the well, the port of entry. The rate begins at $15 per metric ton of carbon dioxide and increases by $10 each year. The money collected from the fee is distributed equally among households as a monthly dividend. This dividend will offset rising costs of fossil fuels for consumers, providing important protections for low and middle income households. And in addition, for approximately 2/3 of households, the dividend will actually put money in their pockets. This incentivizes shifts to low carbon lifestyles and stimulates the economy. This bill is supported by economists and scientists as simple, comprehensive, and effective. It will reduce carbon emissions by 40% in the first 12 years and by 90% by 2050 if we pass it soon. The Energy Innovation Act currently has 82 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives, including our own Representative David Price. 27 Nobel laureate economists, 2 former Treasury secretaries, and over 3,500 economists have endorsed carbon fee and dividend as a highly effective way to dramatically curb the climate change crisis. 21 of those economists are from UNC Chapel Hill. In North Carolina, the city of Durham, Durham County, and Asheville have all signed on in support of this bill. We're seeking the endorsement of every municipality in the Triangle and invite the town of Chapel Hill to extend its support in the form of the resolution before you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's normally our policy to receive and refer so that the manager and mayor, and in this case, the attorney, get a chance to review before we sign a resolution that we haven't actually read through. But because this is the last meeting of our council, I was going to recommend to council if you consider passing it with the stipulation that our attorney and manager get to review it first to make sure that everything in there is something that we can adhere to. I do know that I heard from a couple of the mayors that they passed it, but they had to make a couple of small tweaks. So if that's council's pleasure, we can entertain a motion.
So moved.
Whoa, okay. So moved by Ms. Anderson, second by Mr. Parker on the way around. We'll see. Are there any clarifying questions before we move around? I know that we care deeply about climate change and about these things. And we just want to make sure, because we haven't had a chance to review the wording, that it lines up with what we can normally support.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. So so the motion is to refer it to the manager, mayor, and attorney for review, but pending that it would be adopted pending that. So, all right, here we go. Roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boincy.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Yes. Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And Mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much for bringing this forward to us. We appreciate it. And thanks for keeping your eye on the ball on that one. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. I have a new appreciation for all the hard work you guys are doing.
Yeah. All right. We have time for public who has comment on items that are not on the printed agenda. So if you're wishing to have comment on items not on the printed agenda, please let Mr. Parker know. And we had a couple people signed up already, I believe. Is that correct?
No, but we do have Rachel Kalman raising her hand.
Okay.
So Rachel Kalman, that is the only person that I have as of this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. Oh, sorry, it's very dark in here. I just want to note that I totally agree with the resolution that was just brought up. Thank you, Norma, and the other person whose name I forget. And I also want to recognize a hypocrisy that just happened where Mayor Pam said that you have to review this before it's brought to be voted on, and you did not allow the public for that with your resolution. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Maple Osterbrink.
Okay. Hi, I'm Maple. I was here at the long meeting a few weeks ago, and I did ask about starting an environmental justice commission, or if not a commission, a committee. And then I emailed yesterday to follow up. And I had asked for a $100 budget if we ever get back to in-person meetings for refreshments, but for the year, for 10 meetings in a year, hopefully we could do that. But I know there's an environmental advisory board, but they have a lot of items that or things they're supposed to consider. A lot of it's about land. This would be just about people, the EJ piece for people, you know, tied in with justice in all levels, but for environmental justice neighborhoods, I know there's, you know, RENA exists and those kinds of related issues to have people of color and other cultures and make sure they're the majority on this board. And I haven't been living here that long this time around. I just wanted to start the idea and see what I need to do to legally start a commission and work with you. I live right around the corner from the town hall. So I just wanted to make that statement again and say that I'm very interested in pushing that forward at some point soon as possible. That's all I have to say right now. I will be in touch and just let me know what I have to do. I don't know how to start a commission, or at least I know you can start a temporary committee. So that's why I wanted to speak up tonight and push that along in some way. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll get back to you. I have you in my stack of emails and we will get back to you.
I do not see anyone else wishing to speak, though there are no hands raised and we did not have anybody signed up. So I think.
All right. We move on to announcements. Do council members have announcements? So I have several. One of them tonight is this is officially the last special meeting even, of our longtime town attorney, Ralph Karpanos. I have asked Ralph to be willing to come back with us in the fall so that we can properly honor him as we are in this unusual situation right now, and he's agreed to come back. So that part's good. But he's been with us for 32 years. And we're sorry we can't be together tonight to celebrate him physically, but we are going to honor him later. And I just want to say thank you, Ralph. Thank you for all of your dedicated effort over the years. I know times have been challenging at different times. I get to work with you on all the challenging parts of the state legislature that we've had the last few years. And you were very passionate about how those affect our community in order to keep our communities reflecting the values that we value here, even when they're in conflict with what the legislature is trying to impose upon us. So we appreciate the way you work with us, all the willingness to work with all of us. And I especially appreciate, because I'm not a lawyer, your willingness to explain things in a way that a layperson can understand. So if you wanted to share a few words, but I know we're going to bring you back properly in the fall, we'd love to hear from you.
No, thank you very much, Mayor. I appreciate those kind words, and I look forward to seeing you all when we can get back together again in person in the fall. I know you've got a very busy night tonight, and I'll just leave it at that, and we'll talk some more later at a later day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sure you'll find plenty to do on your Wednesday nights in the future. But on mask distribution, we've had some little bit of changes here. On June 10th, Chapel Hill and Orange County began requiring people to wear masks when entering stores or restaurants and in public places where you could not physical distance. Today, Governor Cooper announced that masks will be required statewide, and you'll hear more about that from our own Kelly Drayton. With the percent of positive tests and the number of hospitalizations on the rise, we need everyone's help and we need everyone to participate. And we know the science says masks work, but in order to make it work, everyone needs to wear one. So if you're in need of a mask, the town is offering them for free on Wednesdays and Saturdays at State Fire Stations 1 and 3. And there's more details on our town website. Already talked to you about the impacted voices. And a friendly reminder to council, we have a closed session tomorrow from 9 a.m. Running till hopefully we'll be done by 12:30. And we also have one reserved for 7 p.m. if we don't finish what we do in the morning. This is the last official council meeting of this season, but our advisory board, several of them will continue to meet. And I know some of you are still involved with those. Agenda, materials, and meeting times can be found on the town calendar. All right. We have a consent agenda before us. There are some amended items in the consent agenda. We changed one date on the proposed fall calendar to not conflict with Veterans Day. So we have that out there. I think that was the only thing that we updated, but we would need to pass the consent agenda with amended items if someone.
I move the amended consent agenda.
All right. Moved by Ms. Anderson, second by Mr. Parker. Again, a roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem Parker. You're muted.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Voincy.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. So thank you. We had several good items on there. We'll let you read it. All right. That brings us to our first item, number 8, an update on the town efforts to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. Oh my.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Kelly Drayton. I'm your Emergency Management Coordinator. This brief presentation will provide some key updates for the town's COVID-19 response over the past several days. As many of you are aware, earlier today, Governor Roy Cooper issued Executive Order 147, which extends Phase 2 until 5 p.m. on July 17th. The decision to extend this safer at home phase is based on science and was made in consultation with public health experts who continue to express concern in the ways that several of our key metrics are trending, metrics such as confirmed COVID-19 cases and numbers of hospitalized COVID-19 patients. Executive Order 147 also requires face coverings in public places where proper physical distancing cannot be achieved, which, as the mayor mentioned, aligns with our local order that we adopted earlier this month. The North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services continues to expand testing capabilities across the state. Currently, North Carolina has over 500 testing sites and is completing an average of 17,000 tests per day. I wanted to offer a quick update on our rent and utility assistance program, which was established in 2015. Over the past 5 years, this program has assisted 88 lower income individuals in housing crisis. County staff has noted that residents who receive initial funds are coming back to ask for additional assistance as they continue to experience financial hardship, often related to COVID-19. To be responsive to this community need, county and town staff have proposed the following changes to the Emergency Housing Assistance Program. First, individuals at 30% or below the area median income can apply up to 3 times for assistance of up to $4,000. And individuals at 60% or below the area median income can apply up to 2 times for assistance of up to $4,000. In addition to these changes, last week, Orange County hired a part-time attorney for its eviction diversion program, a program designed to provide legal assistance to residents facing eviction. The town's call center was closed at 5 p.m. June 19th due to low call volume. However, no void was left for the community. We have replaced all graphics online and on social media that pointed members to the call center, and these are now pointing them to specific departments. The voicemail for the call center also points callers back to specific departmental lines that will be staffed during the same times that the call center was operational. So staffed Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Staff continues to work to ensure that everyone in our community has access to face coverings. Our weekly mask distribution take place on Wednesdays and Saturdays from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. at Fire Stations 1 and Fire Stations 3. We're also accepting donations of face coverings, both cloth and disposable, during those dates and times at the fire stations. We're also accepting donations daily at the Hargraves Community Center. In addition to these distribution sites, we continue to provide targeted distribution of face coverings to our most vulnerable populations by working with our community partners, public housing residents, and through our local food distribution networks. And speaking of food distribution, I did want to offer a quick reminder that starting next week, July 1st, the town's weekly food distribution will move from the Chapel Hill Library to the Eubanks Road Park and Ride lot. All distributions will be held from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Wednesdays. And these food distributions are available to all Orange County residents in need. And at today's food distribution, we served 418 households and just over 1,800 individuals. And a final note, as doctors and scientists, continue to learn more about COVID-19, state and local health professionals continue to urge everyone to practice their 3 W's to help prevent the spread of the virus. Until a vaccine is available, we have to do our best to help reduce the spread and the strain on our healthcare system. The 3 W's, wearing a face covering, washing your hands frequently, and waiting 6 feet apart can help with this. Wearing a face covering in particular is a way that we can care for and protect others in our community. And remember, a face covering isn't intended to protect the wearer from getting sick, but it's intended to help prevent the wearer from spreading illness to others. As Dr. Cohen said earlier today, these 3 W's are things that everyone can do to help get us back to the people and the places that we love. And with that, we'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Okay. Council, any clarifying questions? I want to say a big thank you to our staff. My understanding is that today that most of the department heads were out there helping with the food distribution out into our community. People are still counting on us to help them through this crisis. Meanwhile, Food for Students has also seen an uptick in numbers of people still needing help, and we're up at over 35 sites now. So we're doing our best to make sure everyone's covered and getting extra food to the students and some enrichment opportunities during the summer months as well. And there's been some extra perks going along with, I think there were 600 blueberry muffin kits sent out to different families. So a lot of things, and we're very, very grateful for the work of Liz Cartano and her staff and all the partners that work on food for our students. It's truly an amazing effort, and thank you to our staff for being part of helping our community as we get through this crisis together. Thank you. Ms. Stegman?
Just a really quick question, because I'm getting questions about it from community members. Now that we have approved the expense for the barriers, is there a timeline on closing the lane of Franklin?
I'll let Mr. Jones answer that. I don't know.
Yes, Councilmember Stegman, we are looking at July. We have to order all the parts and the barricades and that type of thing. And then we should be able, once we get that on hand, we should be able to move pretty quickly to get those lanes reallocated.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Parker, is anyone wishing to speak on this item?
There is not anyone that I'm aware of. Nobody's raised a hand.
Okay, thank you. All right. And seeing no more questions. Thank you again, Ms. Drayton, and thank you for always giving us the good updates. The Orange County website is constantly being updated as well. So if you want to find the stats of what's going on countywide, it's on the health department website, so it's there. That brings us to item number 9. Consider land use management ordinance text amendments, proposed changes to section 3.7 and appendix A related to permitting flex office in the town center zoning districts and expanding definitions related to types of retail. Anya?
Good evening. I'm just trying to share my screen and I'm having a technical issue, so I apologize. You know what? I need Amy's help. I'm sorry.
Okay. This is the
Give me
second
one
public
second.
hearing on this text amendment. You're welcome just to talk through it from your screen if you want.
Sure, that sounds great. So we're back in front of you for a text amendment on flex office space, and it's a land use management ordinance text amendment to allow flex office space in the town council or TC zoning districts. The intent behind this was by allowing it in the TC zoning districts, we're creating a little bit more flexibility in what can be in those zones. A little bit about the background was that there had been a request to find a way to include experiential retail. And so one of the things that staff has been working on is looking at all the retail definitions. And so as we were looking at the general business definition, we realized that we could actually expand it to be much more simplified and just say retail sales and retail services. And this would allow us to encompass that experiential retail use without actually having to specifically define it. And so the experiential retail would then be allowed to be in the same zoning districts where business general exists today anyway. We also proposed revising a few other definitions. We wanted to look at recreation facility, commercial indoor. We were revising it so that it's specific to indoor. We were also looking at personal services, and one of the changes how we were doing was expanding that definition to include things like performing in culinary arts, physical exercise, crafts, social customs, and activities. And then the other thing that we looked at was creating some new definitions. And so one was for health club, which would be areas that were 10,000 square feet or more. Indoor sports and exercise activities would obviously be included in these sorts of places. We also provided a definition for personal instruction. So this would be performing in culinary arts, physical exercise, crafts, social customs and activities, things like that. And then finally, we just provided definitions for retail sales and retail services. And these were all outlined in the staff report as well as the resolution of consistency and the draft ordinance. So I'm available if you have any questions, and we did not receive any public comment after the public hearing had been closed.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Anderson?
I'm really excited about this text amendment. I just had one question, and I'm sorry, Anya, that I didn't send it in advance, but somebody had asked me like last week or a while ago, if we're doing something to just ensure that when these are in places where there's residential above or even office above, that we're dealing with the noise. I think there was the example that we always talk about is at East 54 when there was residential above like kickboxing or something. So I just wanted to see if we have a way of addressing that so that we're not having the two uses in conflict.
You know, that's something that I think we've continuously been looking at. I know there had been a question about whether or not this encompassed like outdoor business activities. And so, you know, there are places in the municipal code as well as the LUMA where outdoor activities have a pathway forward to get a permit. In this case, you know, I think we are looking a little bit at making sure that the gyms and the boxing, if they're over the 10,000 square feet, fall into that indoor commercial recreation facility definition so that we can kind of hone it in a little bit more as to what it's supposed to be.
Okay. And so does that mean that there's an additional requirement for them in terms of mitigating noise?
You know, I think that's something that we're continuing to talk about. I don't know that it's necessarily specifically addressed with these text amendments.
Okay, well then it sounds like something we just need, period. And what I hear you saying is that then we would kind of address it in a universal way, not necessarily just in this one. Is that right? Okay, thanks.
All right, Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, I think there actually is there is language in there now under the definitions section of business general. It says all associated activities, noise, odors, and vibrations shall be contained entirely within an enclosed building or tenant space, except as otherwise provided for in this code. So I think I think my understanding was that language was inserted in order to meet that interest. And thank you. I think that's a really good thing to add.
Okay. Are there members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
Possibly. There's one person who signed up, although I'm not sure this is what that this person actually wanted to sign up for, but Kaori Tsuyoshi.
Yeah, that's me. I wasn't aware that this is the section I signed up for. I meant to speak in response to the budget.
Okay.
We can save you for the budget then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right.
No one else.
So it comes back to council.
I move the resolution. I don't know what number it is. I'm sorry.
It's been moved by Ms. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Nguyen.
It's an ordinance.
Well, actually, there are two resolutions. There's the resolution of consistency and then the ordinance.
Right.
All right, so we're moving the resolution of consistency first. It's been moved by Ms. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Nguyen. Roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boincy.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Thank you.
I move the ordinance.
Moved by Ms. Anderson, second by
Second.
Mr. Nguyen. Any questions? Roll call vote again, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boincy.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye and says, thank you very much to our staff for hearing us that we wanted to expand so that we could have other kinds of experiential retail and flex space, which our code did not allow. And now we can have that. And I hope you'll communicate that back out to the downtown partnership and the chamber so they can help spread the word that we have now increased and been a little more flexible in our wording. So thank you very much. Okay, great job. All right, this brings us to item number 10. Consider an application for zoning atlas amendment 137 East Franklin Street and 136 East Franklin Street. Mr. Sudol.
Hope you can all see that. All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Michael Sudol with the Chapel Hill Planning Department. Tonight, I'm bringing back before you an application for zoning atlas amendment for the 137 East Franklin Street Innovation Hub. I have 8 slides and it should just take a couple minutes to present this. The recommendation before you tonight is to adopt the resolution of consistency and to enact Ordinance A approving the rezoning. The application was last seen by you on June 10th when the public hearing was opened and subsequently closed on June 11th. The item is now before you for action with no comments having been received and no changes made since you last saw it. As a reminder, Article 4.4 of the Land Use Management Ordinance establishes 3 findings that can be made for amending the zoning atlas. The first is to correct a manifest error in this chapter, or because of changed or changing conditions in the particular area, or to achieve the purposes of the comprehensive plan. The 0.66 acre site is located on both East Franklin Street and East Rosemary Street, spanning the block. It is comprised of 2 buildings that share an elevator and stair core. The existing buildings exceed the floor area ratio and height requirements of the underlying TC1 and TC2 zoning districts. The rezoning to TC3 would help bring the buildings into compliance with floor area and would increase compliance with height regulations. It would also allow for a proposed 1,000 square foot increase in floor area to enclose the Rosemary Street frontage as part of facade improvements. This is a plan view of the site as it exists today. East Rosemary Street runs along the north side of the property, and East Franklin Street runs along the south side. The parcel boundary is seen here in green, and no changes are proposed to the site. Planning Commission reviewed the proposal on June 2nd and recommended approval. Their recommendation is included in your packet. So once again, the recommendation before you tonight is to adopt the resolution of consistency and enact Ordinance A approving the rezoning. I can take any clarifying questions you have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the second public hearing. Well, sorry, it's the second time we're seeing this item. Are there any clarifying questions from council? Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
There are not.
Okay. Then I bring this back to council. We would have to if you have comments, we've been looking at this for a while, but we would have to move the consistency first and then the item. So
I move consistency.
Second.
been moved by Ms. Ryan, second by Ms. Stegman. Any other comments that haven't been made? All right, roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Wainsey.
Aye.
Councilmember Quinn. Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well. All right, then we need a motion to move the resolution.
Moved.
It's been moved by Ms. Stegman,
Second.
second by Ms. Anderson. Any other clear comments, questions? All right, roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson. You're muted. There you go. You're muted again. Try now.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Wainsey.
Aye.
Councilmember Quinn.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And Mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much, and thanks for getting this through as we see the renovations happening on 137 and 136. Had a small update today that they still have about a year's worth of work on the building to get it habitable, but they're working around the clock even during this time. And they're still having conversations with UNC about leasing and how much space, but it's looking very, very favorable. It won't be the full out original core change of the building, but they are spending about $20 million renovating this existing building. So that was interesting. All right, thank you very much. That brings us to item number 11, the final budget and related items for 2021. And I turn it over to our town manager, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are here tonight to present for your consideration and adoption the budget for fiscal year 2021. Our budget must be passed by the end of June in order to fund our services beginning on July 1st. We have reached this point after months of discussion with the council. We held numerous work sessions with the council in March and April to help us develop a foundation for the budget. And I formally presented the manager's recommended budget on May 20th, followed by a public hearing 2 weeks ago on June 10th. Included with this item is the budget ordinance, pay plan, and fee schedule for the next fiscal year. Our recommendation is to adopt the budget ordinance establishing the town budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020. There are several important takeaways from this budget. There are still many unknowns related to the effect of COVID-19 and how it may impact the fiscal year 21 budget. We do not know how long this event will last. We do not know the true extent of the revenue shortfalls at this point, and we do not know the impact on our service delivery long term. So we've built this budget in a way to give us some flexibility just in case economic conditions worsen as a result of the pandemic. This budget does address many of the council's strategic priorities. The budget does not include a property tax increase. Our property tax rate remains at 54.4 cents. The budget does not include a pay increase for our employees for next year. And our goal of the fiscal year budget is to maintain our current level of core services for the next fiscal year. We are proposing to reduce or eliminate several items for next year's budget with the hope of restoring them in future budget years when the economy does pick up, but we do not believe that those reductions will have any sort of negative impact on our service delivery. There is some good news since the budget was first proposed. We've been able to negotiate our percentage increase on our health insurance for employees down from 4% to 2%. That is a savings for both the town and our employees. The town has also received a couple of fairly large grants for next year, including $386,000 in planning grants and $120,000 to the library. We will be able to increase the living wage for about 20 full-time employees who were below the threshold. That will bring all of our full-time employees up to the living wage. That was a total of $26,000 and will be achieved through salary attrition and hiring freeze savings. We also have up to 172 program support employees who would also see an increase in their hourly wage. Here are the final budget totals that we are recommending council adopt this evening. As you see, that if we do reduce the transfers, if you take the transfers out from the total number, the final budget comes to a little over $111 million. 2 weeks ago, we discussed in detail how the budget is broken down. You'll see in this pie chart the percentages of the total budget for next year. It gives you more accurate accounting of which departments are providing what percentage of the budget. What it doesn't show, however, are some of the other funds that have already been designated for one-time use next year, such as the affordable housing bond money. So the voters of Chapel Hill approved a $10 million bond in November of 2018. $5 million of that funding is expected to be dispersed in fiscal year 2021. The council at your last meeting last week determined what projects would be supported by that $5 million. So when you add that $5 million to the other housing dollars that are in the budget, as you can see on this slide, the town will spend close to $11 million on affordable housing in fiscal year 21. And we anticipate that the total will be similar for fiscal year 22 when the second half of the bond will be dispersed. In light of what we are working through as a nation and in response to the council resolution this evening, calling on new opportunities to enhance public and community safety, we will be examining our service delivery across all of our departments and coming back to council in the near future to discuss how we allocate our resources in an equitable way that will help ensure that all of our residents feel supported and safe in the town of Chapel Hill. We also intend to come back before council on a regular basis during the next fiscal year to provide updates and make budget adjustments based on actual revenue collected as well. As we've mentioned before, we were ready to share the 5-year budget strategy with the town council prior to COVID-19. The goal of the 5-year budget strategy is to help us understand our wants and needs as a community, how best to prioritize the services that we offer, and to discuss how best for us to achieve our strategic goals and our vision. We hope to pick up this discussion with the council next year, depending on what the economy is doing at the time and what our forecasting is for fiscal year 22. We'd like to have that discussion so that we can help shape the fiscal year 22 budget and beyond. Again, our recommendation is for council to adopt the budget ordinance for fiscal year 21. I will take any questions that the council may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice and Amy. I know you've been working hard on this, and with all the unknowns due to COVID and revenues and expenses around COVID's actions, we don't even know how we're going to end this fiscal year. So it's going to be an interesting several months. All right, council, are there clarifying questions before we hear from the public? Ms. Ryan?
Have we gotten any sales tax data for the March through?
We have sales tax data for March, and we were down close to 5%, which you think, the stay-at-home order came in place, the lockdown began about mid-March. So that's not unsurprising to us. We were thinking maybe it would be 10% for a full month. So we'll have a better understanding of what April brought in a few weeks. It's a few months behind in terms of the revenue collections and the reporting on the sales tax, but we saw it was down 5% in March. And so we'll see what April brings. And of course, with May, things started to reopen again. So we'll find out about that in a couple of months. So it doesn't seem to be too off from what we were anticipating. I'm not sure if Amy Olin would like to add to those comments.
Yeah, I think what Maurice said was absolutely correct. I will say that the one thing at this point in the year, and we average out our growth for the year, we're still to the plus. So we're still looking at somewhere around 6.5% growth. So we have a little bit of a cushion, which we built into our projections. But yeah, we had half a month. There's really no telling. March was kind of an odd month. So I do think April will be a better indicator and probably the worst month we'll see. And we'll have those numbers on July 15th, and we can share that information with council. We can provide an update for you all so you can stay abreast of what's been happening.
Great, thank you.
Other clarifying questions for staff? Ms. Gu? You're muted.
Okay. Do we have any updated information about our parking situation? When is the time that we are going to start to recollect the parking fees? Is there any plan in it?
At the moment, we're planning to start collecting fees in July. We may move to August for that, but we haven't finalized that just yet. But certainly by August, we will be collecting the fees on parking.
Okay, so we have not made a decision yet, either July or August.
Yes, it'll be either July or August. August at the latest.
Yeah. So at that time, if it's in August, is it going to be in the same parking rate, or are we actually going to initiate this new parking scale that we having in discussion?
We would be increasing the parking fees in August.
Have we had conversations with downtown business or downtown partnership on that?
We have had some conversations with them about the plans that we have put forward in terms of addressing parking needs and our parking fund. And we will continue to have those discussions with them over the course of the next few weeks and month.
So is there a channel, because I have heard concerns from people with regard to that, is there a channel for them to formally express their opinion or concerns, or like send their comments?
They can always send their,
of
yes,
course, I understand they can always send an email, but is there outreach session or some way that to reach the communities to make sure that they understand here is a plan that we have and we actually are going to, so it's like 1 hour from $1 to $1.50?
We haven't determined that just yet, but there will be an increase. It's either $1.25 or $1.50.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think either case, it's a 25% or 50% increase. It's a pretty significant increase, and especially at this time, it's a pretty challenging time for our downtown small businesses. I would like to make sure that they're aware of that, and we provide a channel to hear from them.
Sure, we can do that.
Maurice, can I just ask too, it's not consistent downtown. Right now, we're already charging $1.50 on the street parking. And on some of our lots, it's just the Wallace deck that we were only charging the $1 and I'm not sure about lot 2. I get confused when it all gets.
Wallace, lot 2 and the CVS deck were all at the $1 and everything else is at the $1.50. So what we were looking at was, yes, as you mentioned, consistency across the board, and on street is $1.75.
Oh, okay. So just clarifying, I didn't remember which ones were which. Okay. Other clarifying questions? All right, I know we have some members of the public signed up to speak on this. Mr. Parker, can you help us bring folks into?
We have Maggie Blanc followed by Nancy Oates.
I think Kaori raised her hand again.
Yeah, we will get there.
Ms. Blunt doesn't plan on speaking again, so it would be Nancy Oates followed.
Okay, Nancy Oates followed by Rachel Thomas Levy.
Okay, I wanted to thank you for fully funding the living wage component, the living wage commitment. I think it reflects well on the town that we're committed to helping people move up the socioeconomic ladder. And I appreciate whatever Mr. Jones and Ms. Olin had to go through in order to get us to this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Rachel Thomas Levy followed by Marialta Fenneman again.
Hello, my name is Rachel Thomas Levy and I am a Chapel Hill resident. I was going to speak on the budget concerning the current police budget, and that it has not changed whatsoever since the last meeting. And just to speak to the fact that George Barrett said earlier, there's this, I think what you can hear, lack of trust with the council being accountable. And I think that a budget is really like something that holds our members, our servants, our public servants. It holds between them and the people they serve. And when the budget doesn't show that, that is the document that shows it, right? So I just believe that those funds should be reallocated. I know there's a bond for affordable housing, but I also know that if you don't build in something that the community cares about that much into your budget, that's not really supporting it the way you could be. And that bond passed with the blood, sweat, and tears of people in the community, those on the front lines, and 1% for housing and community just looks criminal on a pie chart, to be perfectly frank. And I believe that y'all know who to listen to, who's on the front lines in terms of defunding the police. There are plenty of voices in the community, and I just urge you to deeply listen, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mary Alta Fetterman, followed by Sonia D. No last name.
Hi, thank you for hearing me again. I would just like to add to what was just said, that I would like to see an itemized budget for the police department. I think that because such a large percentage of the town's funds go to police, that we should be able to see where that money is actually going. And that seems like a pretty reasonable ask, and something that would help with transparency. I also want to say that that is an ask that I'm not just asking for. Black leaders in the community have also voiced this, and organizers who we've talked to. So an itemized budget for the largest recipient of town funds seems like a pretty healthy way to present this budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sonia D, followed by Paris Miller.
Hi there. I wanted to ask you to vote to delay the budget to vote after July 1st, since I know that's the start of the new fiscal year, or that's the deadline you've been given. You have the power to delay this vote, and you have the power to vote no on it if it does not reflect your values. And I wanted to echo what Emily and Trinity were saying at the beginning, and the last speaker's request for the itemized budget. I still don't know. After 2 weeks, I sent in an email requesting to know what the itemized budget was. I know Assistant Lead Police Jay Hunter was working on that, I think. I still haven't been able to find information. And this is very important, as well as an understanding of the resources that are already in inventory and what kind of contracts and what kind of surveillance contracts are there, and how are these resources being used and focusing more on punishment rather than like investment in the community, developing empathy, developing other types of relational practices that can actually make us safer. I hope that you vote to delay the budget so that it can reflect these values. Thank you.
Thank you. Paris Miller, followed by Sarah Hoffman.
Hi, good evening. I believe somehow I was put to speak on this item, and I had no intentions on speaking on this item. I've already spoken on the item that I wanted to, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sarah Hoffman, followed by Kaori Tsuyoshi.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sarah Hoffman. I use she, her pronouns. I've been a resident of Chapel Hill for 18 years, and I'm a current graduate student at UNC Law and Duke Sanford School of Public Policy. I just want to reiterate what you've already heard tonight from different community members like Dolores Bailey and others, that urgent action to divest from the police and invest in community resources is needed. Dollars for the police budgeted in this funding cycle need to go back to communities in the form of things like mental health supports and employing more Black and brown people in our schools. I also want to ask, like others have done before me, that you change the budget structure for the next cycle, being unable or unwilling to meaningfully accommodate the input of your constituents between the public hearing and final budget adoption meetings. Invalidates the public hearing period, or that's the way that it feels. And I understand that there aren't questions now, and you weren't at the last meeting, which I also understand due to time constraints, but I do still ask when and how can we, the community members, be engaged in these community conversations. This process, just as a whole, the budget process needs community voices and must be transparent, including a publicly available timeframe and accountability structure going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Ms. Koyoshi.
Hi, thanks for putting me back in this slot. Kaori Sueyoshi, also she, her pronouns, born and bred Chapel Hillian. I wanted to thank you all for the thorough budget presentation and do want to take time to acknowledge and honor how challenging it would be to govern during this time when there's multiple layers of tragedies that you are balancing between COVID, the economic downturn, and police brutality. And also emphasizing that the common thread amongst those, and when we see the most harm, is anti-Black racism. I'm here to just put my voice behind those who spoke earlier, like Anna Richards, George Barrett, Emil Charles, Dolores Bailey, and emphasizing that urgent action is needed on defunding and reallocating from the police, which we know is a major barrier to achieving equity in our town. I was super encouraged actually to hear the resolution at the beginning, also emphasizing that I don't feel like I've had enough time to digest it, but I do think that it signifies that this council, recognizing that it's not inconvenient, but rather the irresistible thing to do, to imagine a Chapel Hill where race is not the determinant for your access to safety, health, and happiness. I do think that's a first step. I also believe that voting yes in favor of this budget signifies that you are satisfied with the status quo, and we all know that's insufficient. I'm hopeful that with the resolution that you described before, that there will be a publicly available and clear accountability framework that comes rather quickly rather than as in the form of simple task forces, which can and often have the risk of delaying decisions. I can speak to that personally. Again, as a former member of the Justice in Action Committee, there's a letter in our public records from 2014 where I asked for more information for our police department on our efforts to diminish or respond to race equity concerns, and that letter remains unanswered. That was 2014. This budget reads as race blind when we know that race is the issue at the core, and that race-based discrimination and disparities described by the speakers at the top of the meeting should be the primary and priority concern addressed by this town council. So again, I just wanted to emphasize that the resolution is just one step, but clear accountability is much, there's a lot to desire for clear accountability, and that we expect more answers, and that a vote yes in favor of this budget is standing with the status quo. And I implore you to explore how you represent our town's values by doing so. Thank you.
Thank you.
That appears to be the last speaker. There's no more raised hands. We accommodate everybody who signed up. So I think we can move back to council.
Thank you. I've asked Mr. Jones to respond with a few comments, please.
Sure. Mayor, you'd asked about the transit being actually our largest department. I think there was a reference to the police department being the largest department, but it's actually transit. And you know, as we tried to highlight with the slide on housing, the investment that the town's making in next fiscal year is close to $11 million in affordable housing, and then we anticipate we'll see another $11 million in affordable housing dollars for fiscal year 22, if not more, depending on what's going on with the economy as we head into the spring of next year and forecasting for fiscal year 22. But in terms of the dollars that are being invested in affordable housing, it's close to $11 million next year.
And the police budget is close to $13 million, is that correct?
Yes, it's close to $13 million.
Okay. And the fact that we have to pass a budget by the end of June, that's state mandated. We don't get a choice to delay.
we do have to pass the budget by the end of June. As I mentioned before, in order to ensure the services continue next week, actually. So it's really important for us to get that passed, and it is a mandate for us to have it done by then.
But we are allowed to amend our budget during the year.
Absolutely. There's a process for amending the budget. We do it probably a couple times a year, where we will come and explain to council that we've received grants, or, and usually that's what's driving that process, is we'll receive some additional funding, or we know that we are doing a little bit better when it comes to revenue collection, and we might invest in some other things that we hadn't anticipated for the year. So, and that is what we anticipate doing for next year as we talk about COVID and its impacts. And then as council addressed in its resolution, they do want our staff to take a good look at where we are allocating funds, and as part of the work of the task force to come back with some recommendations for how we invest in our community and invest in the issues that are really important to the town of Chapel Hill.
And I know our budget documents can be very confusing. We have many funds. The general fund is one fund. It's not the overall budget. We have an overall budget document, and then we have enterprise funds. We are working on trying to find ways to make it more clear. It's hard because it's a very complicated, complex, because of federal and state and county interactions with our budget, and even UNC actually interactions with our budget for transit. So I know it's confusing. I know it's hard to determine what's going on with certain pieces, but we are working on trying to make it more clear for more folks. So I bring it back to council members. Do you have comments or statements to make? More questions that weren't answered? All right, Ms. Gu.
Well, I think I want to respond to the comments because I heard from several people saying that if we are adopting the budget as it is now, that means that we are not serious about, or there's not sincere efforts trying to reform or both the police operation and our town's investment plan. Well, I think that I understand the urgency for us to take actions. But on the other hand, I want to make sure, because my background is in medicine, as we always do in medicine, that the first principle is do no harm. So I think that we own it to our community, and I own it to all, especially the ones that who are marginalized, or the Black and brown communities, who is almost always the case that if we take actions without carefully evaluate the impact of those actions and what kind of impact it's going to have for the most vulnerable communities, the most vulnerable populations in our community. So I think that it's our responsibility to make sure that what the actions that we're going to take at this time, it is a action plan that, after careful consideration of all the evidences and all the data that we can collect at this time, and also we get the input from our community, as much as I understand the urgency of taking actions and the appeal from our community, but I think that as the council, we own it to the community, especially the most vulnerable ones, that to move cautiously and to make sure that we understand whatever we do, we're going to make sure that we're making sure everyone in our community, especially the most vulnerable ones, that are protected. And we're beyond that, we're going to make investment on them. I think there are lots of options. And I would say that we actually need to examine not only the police budget. If you're really serious and want to study that issue, how we're going to invest out in our communities in the future, you need to look at all the other components of the budget as well, including our economic development plan, right? So I think that there are a lot of issues that we can discuss. And I want to encourage the young people, and I think actually feel very encouraged at this time, seeing a lot of the students, the young populations actually get onto this process, pay attention, and trying to be a force of reform and positive changes in our community. And I want to encourage that. And I just want to say that do not stop here. The passing the budget does not mean that that is the end of the process. It's the beginning of the process. I want you to be engaged and to make sure that you're part of this, to make sure that you're going to examine all the different components and reach out to the people who usually does not have a voice in this community. And working together, we can make our town an exemplar for social justice and equality.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen, did you have a comment? You're muted. Here we go.
Yeah. I just wanted to also say that, I think being receptive to what we're hearing from all of the speakers, both tonight as well as last time, I was gonna see if it was possible to propose a friendly amendment to the ordinance where could we commit then as a council to revisit the budget once the task force that we're implementing through this resolution, once their recommendations come through, just making a stronger commitment to do that.
I yield to the manager. I'm not sure what the process, when we pass a budget, whether we're allowed to do that or not. I don't know.
Well, I mean, we certainly could. It will be dependent on how much funding we have at that point. We're talking about March of next year when the recommendations come back. So we'll be dependent on what we've collected in terms of our revenue and where we are in terms of being able to disperse that money or move it at that point. And I would imagine that we would also have to be in a position that would put us in a position to be really thinking about fiscal year 22 in terms of major significant changes to the budget. You're really at that point at March, you're almost into the fourth quarter of the year, the final quarter of the year, and you couldn't make a lot of changes. But as we've said before, as we're going through this process, and I think Ms. Richards made mention of maybe even being able to do some things before those recommendations come back, in which we could come back to council if the funding is there to invest in other ideas that may come up or recommendations that may come up prior to the task force having their final recommendations. So I think there's some things that we can do throughout the year that would be responsive to some of the issues that are raised and maybe some of the recommendations that we're starting to see come out of the task force without having to wait until March. Because once you get to March, as I said, you're going into the final quarter. There's not a lot of funding that you can adjust at that point.
Gotcha. And I guess just to clarify, I'm not suggesting that we don't do those things prior to March. I was just saying, can we just make a commitment that we will take a look at the budget and revisit it at that point in March? And if things have been done and we think we're in a good spot, then I think we're in a good spot. If not, you can take a look.
We can certainly have a conversation with council at that point.
Ms. Ryan, then Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, and I think part of the resolution that we passed earlier tonight talks about that one of the goals of the task force will be recommendations on reallocating resources as necessary to accomplish the task force goals. So I think I think it's inherent in the process that will happen. We just didn't want to spell out things in detail to kind of hamstring and constrain the process, but to let it unfold, let it hear from the community, and then have the freedom to say, okay, we think this is the next best step forward. So I think, Ty, your interest is met in the resolution.
Okay, Ms. Anderson.
I was going to say basically the same thing, that I think the resolution addresses that, and part of why we tried to line it up with next year's budget, also knowing that things would be coming back before then, but then it would give us enough time to really do some high quality, in-depth reconsideration when we look at the budget as a whole, instead of doing kind of one-off things that aren't in context. So I think that the resolution at least tried to address that. And certainly as things come back, I'm sure we can do budget amendments, but really I think the foundational, the formative work, the transformational work will be in being able to look at this as the budget process goes along for next year, because I know that we're all, that change is hard and it takes some humility and patience, but I think if we're patient and we really do a great job of doing a 5-year budgeting plan and looking in depth at our budget, that's where those, you know, big picture changes can happen. And so I think that's a really exciting opportunity. Budgets usually are not exciting, but I think that that is a really great opportunity for, instead of trying to do one-off things that we don't know how they're all going to fit together, I think it's that big picture looking at the entire budget and figuring out how we shift and how we address needs. So I think that that we'll be in a really good position with the recommendations as they come, as well as next budget cycle.
Stegman, then Mr. Voinsey.
I guess what I was hearing Councilmember Wynn say is something a little bit different. I agree with what Mr. and Ms. Anderson are saying, but I think I was also hearing Councilmember Wynn speaking to what we were hearing, I guess about a lack of trust. Our resolution does commit us, but I think we need to acknowledge that there's a lack of trust in us as a body at this moment in time. So if there is a way that we can just sort of, as part of our budget document, we're not doing, you know, what some of the community has asked us to do tonight. And there's reasons for that. But if there is a way in this budget document to reaffirm our commitment, it doesn't have to be in March. I think we'll have to see how it goes, but there's a likelihood we will hear from the task force as it goes along. It may not be March. There could be things that come up. Who knows what it is, right? It could be around school resource officers. It could be some of the other topics that we've already kind of, and the community has identified as concerns. There may be opportunities to make changes. So I don't think we're committing to anything specific without that input, but that to just reaffirm that we are not doing business as usual and just passing a resolution and hoping things just kind of stay the same. So that's kind of, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's kind of what I heard as the intent, and I would certainly be supportive of that if there's a way to make that statement with the budget document itself.
Okay, Mr. Boynton.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I appreciate the spirit that's behind Councilmember Wynn's proposed friendly amendment. And I appreciate also what Mr. Jones said about the process of budget amendments and how that can be a method by which we can move funds and resources around through reallocation. I'm hoping that we can take that chance with that process to be responsive to our community. And I hear and understand the frustration of many who have spoken tonight and many who are watching and not seeing what they would like to see in the budget. Unfortunately, we have statutory obligations for passing the budget by June. Otherwise, there are some pretty serious consequences for us. And we are on a pandemic, and we don't want to worsen things, more than they are, and hopefully won't be. But I just want to say that I hear the frustration. As a council, I know that we are committed to re-examining the way we do things, re-examining our funding. We're committed to having a task force that will help us do that deep dive into our budget so that we can do the good and lasting impactful work of really prioritizing funding where it needs to be. So I appreciate Councilmember Wynn's proposed amendment, and if there is some way that we can work that in, language, that sounds fine to me.
Okay, Mr. Parker, you're muted.
because I absolutely, understand with, Mr. Boynton and Mr. Nguyen have expressed and others that, we have a community that is, I think, certainly some important segments of the community are frustrated and are not, feeling like we're responding the way they would like us to this evening. And I understand their frustration, and I also know, some of the reasons why we can't. But, the manager mentioned that over the coming year, we will be relooking at the budget based on what happens with our funding streams and all those other things. And I think, whether what happens with sales tax revenue, what happens with COVID, what happens with UNC reopening. And so I think that I don't know if it's appropriate to put it in a resolution, but I would at least like a commitment from, our manager and his staff that, that the same way we're going to look at our budget based on changes that are potentially due to revenue increases or shortfalls, that we will continually over this next year, not as sort of a one-time event, but the same way that we're always looking at our budget to see what changes may or may not be necessary, that we apply that same thinking to our budget based on what we're learning as we get data, as things change in terms of, implementing our resolution and making to the extent possible, some of the kinds of changes that we've been hearing about over these past 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay. I agree with a lot of the comments. We're saying we have statutory requirements. We have operations. Most of about 73 to 4% of our budget is people in all kinds of departments. We need to be thoughtful in making the changes. We don't understand all that COVID is going to do to our revenues and our need for services in many different categories. You're going to hear about the CARES Act monies next. I do think this council, I know this council is committed to taking a deep look into how we do things and to respond to what the community's asked us to respond to. And I agree with Ms. Gu that we want to do that in a thoughtful way to make sure it's lasting and not just a reaction to something. We want to make substantial change. And I agree with her, passing this budget is a beginning, not an end. We are going to have to make changes all year long. And I know I don't want to wait till March for the task force final report. I think there's going to be steps along the way that we can take. We also have some affordable housing projects going on that will be very involved, and we're excited about those as well. And we do need to bring the whole community in for the conversation. We have certain groups that have spoken loudly, and we have other groups that have not spoken at all. So we need to make sure that we're inclusive as we make changes to how we do things in Chapel Hill. And it takes longer. And I get the frustration with the people who have spoken. And I hate that this is our last meeting because we didn't get a chance to let people see the resolution. We did share with some community partners to get feedback. But because of the deadline and because of wanting to take action, the council is elected to make these kinds of decisions. We take that responsibility very seriously, but we also want public input. And unfortunately, this just ends up being the last day at the end of the fiscal year for us. And that made it a little harder. So, Mr. Nguyen, if we can capture the intent through the resolution and make a commitment as a council to come back and talk about these issues in the early fall, because that would be our first opportunity. We'll know a lot more by then. We'll have closed out the fiscal year of June 30th. We'll have those numbers sometime late August. So we can commit to bringing this back as a topic. I will commit to work with the manager to make sure it's on an agenda so that we can start those conversations. I just can't give you a date at this particular time until we know more. But we'll commit to having it on an agenda in the fall as soon as possible. And hopefully the work will have gotten started with taking that deeper dive and gathering community input. If that would satisfy your needs at this point, and we can make that commitment.
Yeah, I think committing to putting it on an agenda in the fall will suffice.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will commit to that. And I know the manager will as well. Okay. So that brings us back to the budget ordinance. How does the council say?
I move the budget ordinance.
Second.
So moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Anderson. Any comments that haven't been shared already? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Boyancy, Councilmember Nguyen,
Aye.
Councilmember Gu,
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan,
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman,
Aye.
and Mayor says aye as well. I do want to highlight, you also passed in the budget ordinance that we are going fare free at our library, or fine free at our library, and some other issues in there to help with equity. And we will start highlighting those as we go along so that people are aware. Again, I know our budget is complicated. I know there's many, many levels and pieces, and we're going to try to find ways too to make it less complicated. But it's quite the document. So thank you all, and thank you for staff for working very hard. And we were waiting to hear how the end of this fiscal year turns out, as that helps inform how we move forward as well. So thank you. All right, that brings us to item number 12. Consider enacting a budget ordinance amendment for the CARES Act funding. Mr. Richardson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you all see the full screen version?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, well, good evening again. My name is John Richardson. I serve as your Community Resilience Officer. And this evening, the item before you is a budget ordinance amendment to officially receive the CARES Act funding allotment that the town received from Orange County. I've got about 16 slides and it should take me 12 minutes or so. So just to start with a little bit of information about what CARES is, CARES stands for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic Security Act. It's about a $2 trillion federal economic relief package that was passed earlier this spring by Congress. And the aim of CARES is to protect people from the public health and economic impacts of COVID-19. So our recommendation to you this evening is that the council enact the attached budget ordinance amendment, which is labeled 06. And this funding, what it will do is really help us do more of the same things we've already been doing to support the community. It can also enhance our efforts to do those things. From a technical standpoint, the amendment would be adopted as part of this year's fiscal budget, so FY 19-20. And what we would do is carry the unspent funds forward into the next fiscal year. So in terms of the recent timeline, we submitted a request to Orange County in late May. I think you all saw a copy of that request. Shortly thereafter, we received the funding in the amount of $746,410. Of course, tonight in the green box you see there, the consideration is to officially adopt, or excuse me, enact the ordinance that's in your packet that would.
John, you keep fading in and out. Can you either get closer to your computer or something?
Sure, I apologize for that. Is this a little better?
That's much better, thank you.
Okay. So as I was saying, tonight we're at the green box where we are asking you to consider bringing the money into the town's budget. And our plan is to come back to you in the fall with an update. And I just wanted to quickly mention too that the money, the $746,000 is allocated on a per capita formula from the county, which is the same formula that they use for sales tax. So Chapel Hill is receiving about 28% of what the county received from the state, which is 2.6 million. Okay, so a little bit more information about the funding itself. The $746,000 is part of the CARES Act and specifically part of the Coronavirus Relief Fund, which is a part of CARES. And the CRF funding is specifically geared towards states, local governments, and tribal governments to help us navigate COVID-19. The funding does need to be spent by December 30th of this year, and eligible expenses can date back to March 1st. So that's our spending period. And the funding also must be deemed necessary to the response and recovery to COVID. This slide just gives you some examples that you've seen before from the county when they presented back in May. These are examples of eligible expenses, which range from personal protective equipment and the ability to decontaminate sites or spaces, public spaces, all the way to food delivery, care for people experiencing homelessness, support for our small businesses through grants, and also housing related support. This slide is a summary of the budget ordinance amendment from your packet. And as I mentioned before, this money will help us do more of what we've been doing to respond to COVID-19. It's also going to help us plan for recovery, help us plan for coming back and building a more resilient future here in Chapel Hill. And on that note, the categories that you see on the left-hand side of the screen, human services, housing, economic support, et cetera, these are all categories from the long-term recovery planning effort that's taking place at the county as well. So that's the reason we like these categories, because they do align with that effort. The other thing to mention too is on page, which you've probably seen on page 169 of your packet, we do have some detailed listings of possible expenses, and I will speak to some of those more specifically in a minute. I also wanted to mention that the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office recommends that we use FEMA dollars first. And so you may have noted that the health line item may seem small. There's two reasons for that. One is that there are health related measures built into some of the other line items, but also that with the FEMA first advice from the state, we're planning to follow that. And so we would plan to seek FEMA reimbursement for several of our expenses that date back as far as January 20th, which are eligible, as well as those that would be eligible going forward. So that's why that line item is a little smaller than you might think. The other point I wanted to make on this slide is that we are, as I mentioned, in collaboration with Orange County and the towns of Carrboro and Hillsborough, in working with a consultant, which I think you've gotten updates from Kelly on before, regarding recovery efforts, a joint effort to do that. And so our portion of that is estimated at up to about $49,000. And so what we're recommending tonight is that you also consider that we look at economic support and possibly public information as a secondary line item to draw from to provide our portion to that countywide effort. Okay, so just to dig into some of the examples here, the first one being sheltering with physical distancing. This is something the town has already done. We've already invested in this, and we could continue to do so. The example here is with the IFC, where we have provided some sheltering for people experiencing homelessness.
You're fading in and out again. Can you get a little closer again?
Sure, I'm sorry about that. I know my internet connection is also poor tonight. But is this better?
Yes.
Okay. So we have done some of this work already with the IFC, and the idea here is that we could do more of this to provide sheltering with proper physical distancing. Another example is food distribution. So this is an example of where we could invest in part-time program support staff to manage a food distribution program that already exists. And part of the challenge we have at this point is that we've got staff as well as several volunteers who've been doing quite a bit of work on this. Those staff members are also pulling double duty, so to speak, with their existing full-time jobs. So the benefit here would be to invest in a part-time program support staff person to dedicate their time to help manage this program as we go forward. Under the category of housing, emergency housing assistance, this would be emergency relief for both rental assistance and foreclosure prevention. And by emergency, what we mean is that these funds would be available after other resources and assistance have been exhausted. Again, under the human services category, Here's an example of a possible program around internet access, specifically for low-income households. And this would be designed to support distance learning, remote working, and possibly job seeking as well. Changing gears a little bit to economic support. Here, there's an opportunity for small business grants, and these would be grants to help provide assistance to businesses. It could be personal protective equipment, plexiglass barriers, or other ways of helping our local businesses get back up. On that same note, there's also the possibility of investing in a long-term economic recovery plan. So this would be funds to work collaboratively with local partners to create a plan for long-term economic recovery as we move forward. Under the category of community planning and capacity building, this is an example around space for safe travel. And specifically, the idea here is temporary in-road multi-use paths. So here, what we're thinking of providing is additional mobility options with the proper physical distancing for people walking, biking, and otherwise traveling in these more heavily traveled areas of our town. And I will also note that there are other communities that are doing this work. We've looked at Brookline, Massachusetts, Portland, Oregon, Greenville, South Carolina, and Washington, D.C. as some examples from around the country. The last example here is around public information. And so here the example is about HD quality broadcasting for meetings just like this one, as well as for our advisory board meetings. And so the goal would be to upgrade some of our equipment and our technology to move from the image you see on the left, which is standard definition image, to the image you see on the right, which is a high definition image, to make these presentations clearer, particularly for people who are streaming them at home or watching a recording later. And this is my last slide. Again, this is just the recommendation that I mentioned earlier. And as a quick recap, I just want to say that the purpose of the amendment, again, is to recognize and appropriate these funds, these CARE Act funds that we received from Orange County. And this gives the town the authority to spend this money. I'll also note that the town can, at any time before December 30th of this year, make changes to this proposed spending plan by designation of the town council or the town manager. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be glad to try and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, John. Can you give us back full screen?
Yes.
Council members, are there clarifying questions from John? Ms. Ryan?
John, when you were talking about reallocating funds to go to help pay for the county consultant who's coming in for economic recovery, I just want to make clear, will any of the money that is being taken from other pots, will it be like direct food aid or direct housing aid, or is it all from other things?
Sorry, Councilmember Ryan, you cut out right at the last part of that question for me. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, so the money that's going to go to help pay for the county consultant on economic recovery, the pots that we would draw that from, are they pots that would otherwise be paying for direct aid like food or housing or foreclosure assistance?
Not as we would recommend it. We were envisioning that money could come from the economic support line, or potentially as a secondary measure, the public information line. The reason the economic support line may be favorable is because we're also pursuing grants for a lot of those same activities. And if we were to be awarded, a nice way to offset that, that additional funding that we may receive.
Thank you.
Ms. Gu, did you have a question?
Yes. When in your presentation, I didn't see the items that includes like testing or monitoring the health status for the high-risk essential service members. That could be like our town's bus drivers or some other town staff that directly in contact with the public, with direct and the frequent contact with the public. So I think that given they are at the high risk of like being infected because of their high frequency contact, and also because they're in this position of reaching a lot of the members in the public. So if they're being infected, then they're going to have a significant impact on the community spread of COVID-19. I would think that, especially given what the other cities are doing, especially if the North Carolina or in Orange County's number keep on climbing, I think that will become necessary. Is there fundings to expect the possibilities of like potential needs for that?
Councilmember Gu, we are, yes. The answer to your question is yes. We do not have that specifically designated for CARES Act funding, but we do have funding to take those steps, and we are working on plans to do just exactly what you had talked about. So we do have funding that could cover that. Plus, some of that funding could be reimbursable through FEMA as well.
Okay. So is there a limit of the FEMA funding, or how the FEMA funding and this CARES funding relate to each other, or especially like how much amount that we have for the FEMA funding?
There's not specific FEMA funding. You'd get reimbursed for the expenses that you would put forth for FEMA. It does take some time, quite frankly, to hear back from FEMA on that. And so you can, from FEMA, you could receive up to 75% of your expenses. And so we would submit, we are carefully tracking all of our expenditures that are associated with COVID-19, and we would submit those to FEMA for reimbursement. But as I mentioned, it does take some time to hear back from them, especially in a situation like this where you're talking about the entire country being affected by COVID and the pandemic. Under normal circumstances, you'd be dealing with, like, for instance, a natural disaster, like a hurricane or that type of thing, which would be more isolated than what we're dealing with here. So it'll take some time for us to have an understanding of what we would be reimbursed for as part of COVID and how much that would be.
Yeah, well, I remember that at this week's transit department meeting, I asked this question of what procedures that we're taking to either do frequent testing or health checklist, those kind of procedures, to put them in place to ensure that our bus drivers, they're safe. And so in that regard, that our passengers of our transit system are safe as well. So I think that if there anything that we can do, especially in expecting the potential climb of the community spread of COVID-19, I think we need to prepare for that. Another issue I have been hearing from our community, especially for the Hispanic and the African-American community, is this disproportional infection rate among the Black and the brown community, and also the data shows that there is a widespread family-wide clusters of infections. So from the data from other cities and the communities, that it shows if we have fundings to provide like alternative housing for the family members. So when they need to do the isolation, when one family member is infected, then there's an option that we'll provide to them so they can isolate themselves, so they're not going to infect the other members in the family. I think that will be necessary, especially for the communities in low-income and the Black and the brown communities, because their housing usually is more crowded than the general public. So I don't know if that is something that can be included in our housing fund that we discussed.
I think we could certainly have conversations with our partners in the region as well to talk a little bit more about that and see what that would look like and what the cost would be associated with that. And we can see how, if that is something that we could take care of from a housing standpoint from the CARES Act funding. One of the concerns I have is that a good portion of the money that we're putting forward is to help with rental assistance right now, because we know that's a desperate need in our community, especially with some growing concerns over evictions and possible foreclosures in the near future. So that's why we've dedicated some funding to help address that immediate need. But we can have a conversation with health department and with our regional partners about the question you've raised about providing some level of housing for folks who may have already seen the COVID enter into their home, and to try to protect other members of their family. But you're right that there has certainly been an increase in the Latinx community. We've known for some time now that African Americans have been disproportionately affected by this pandemic, and we are seeing more so in the last few weeks or so an increase in the number of Latinx folks who are being infected as well. And I know there's been efforts underway to try to promote the things that folks will need to do to help protect themselves in both African American communities and in the Latinx communities. And then real efforts have been made, as we've been telling council now for several weeks, about mask distribution. And the town has spent a significant amount of time and energy providing masks to folks, whoever needs them. And we've very specifically been targeting low-income folks and our vulnerable populations as well to help diminish the spread of the virus within those communities.
Just to build on that, we got an update from the health director that they've made great progress in communicating, especially with the Latinx community, which we hadn't been able to communicate as well, working with El Centro, Facebook live streaming, and getting the messaging out there to educate folks about all the things that we have available and about the science in language and from a source that they trust. And so we're doing a better job of communicating because we saw a spike in our Latinx community, and that triggered getting better education out there about things like you said about isolating. But if you can't isolate, to wear a mask in your own home if you are COVID positive, and some other things that the health director has shared with them. And those efforts will continue to be out there to help with folks like that. Okay. Other clarifying questions? Maurice, I want to go back to the money for evictions and foreclosures. We know that the need, the phone's been ringing a lot more now as people are trying to figure out how to make up for several months, just not one or two. And I really want to see our monies dedicated to helping we don't want families evicted. We don't want anyone evicted, but we need to make sure, and I wasn't sure the allocation that you guys came up with was going to be as helpful as I think the need is going to be. I know we have another pot of money. I know that people are making donations. We have set up a fund to help with this as well, if people wish to donate to that fund to help reduce the threat of evictions or foreclosures. But I have really believed that need is going to be increasing in the next few months, especially given that we're taking phase 2 another 3 weeks. That means a lot more people are still going to be unemployed, and they're not sure what's going on with the unemployment funding at this point either. So I want to make sure that that is a top priority for us, to make sure that people are not being evicted, and to, I understand we need better equipment for broadcasting our messaging. It's terrible, but I would choose not evicting people over anything like that any day. And it's just, we've got to make sure people aren't, during this pandemic, put out of their homes.
Well, thankfully, that message received, Mayor, and thankfully we at this point don't feel as though we'll need to make a choice between those two. We do have other pots of funding that have been set aside specifically to address issues related to rental assistance and housing assistance. And we have some CDBG funding that we can tap into as well. So we do have a couple of different pots of funds that we can use to try to address those issues.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us know that. All right. Do we have members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
We do not.
Anna Richards just raised her hand.
Oh, okay, then we do. Anna.
Hi, can you, okay. Oh, okay. No, I just was going to underscore the $155,250 for public info and intergovernmental affairs. And I just think that I would really endorse this budget for these specific COVID funds being really directed toward the human needs that are coming out of COVID. And so understand that we're doing more of these kind of meetings and you'd like the equipment to be better, but I know that we're experiencing and hearing the needs of the community. And I just, if we have other pots of money, let's get equipment in that budget and put this one toward human needs. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I come back to council. More comments? Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, I'm going to second your comments, and Ms. Richards. I think as much as we can get to human needs out of this money, I think we need to do that. I think that's where the real tragedies are going to be happening. So,
yeah. Ms. Gu, did you have a comment?
Yes, another, well, I think that I heard that we are going to actually make funding available to create more outdoor spaces and the spaces for people to travel by bicycles and a pedestrian. I think I would just want to comment that. I think that is a very important investment, especially if there are increased spread of the infection, then it will impact people's ability or willingness to take the public transit. At that time, using a bicycle, actually, it has been shown that around the country and around the world has spiked in all the cities with the needs that people actually take essential trips, like going to work, going to buy food by riding a bicycle. So I think if that is something that we can push forward with this funding, I think that will significantly help a lot of the people who otherwise would count on public transit, but at this time they will not be able to do so. So I just want to comment that that is a very important investment.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson and Mr. Parker.
I would agree with putting as much money as we can towards kind of human needs. I also just wanted to say a really huge and heartfelt thank you to Maurice and all your staff. I know everybody has changed jobs and done overtime and put themselves at risk and have been doing amazing things. And we asked if we could make sure to get masks out before there was any requirement, so we weren't making it so some people without means wouldn't be able to comply, and the staff jumped into action, and now they're being handed out at fire stations. So that's just one of the tiny things that you all have done through all this, but truly I just think it's really important. I hope anybody listening, if you see our staff on the street, please just say thank you to them. They have been working overtime. They've done an amazing job. I know I speak for all of us, but it really has been amazing to see that the staff has done everything they have to do with getting us through our regular lives and our regular work and doing it all virtually. And then on top of that, making sure that they're taking care of our community and keeping people safe. So thank you for all of that. It has been very humbling to see.
Thank you, Councilmember Anderson, for those kind words. Our staff has worked really hard, and I do appreciate that recognition. And at every step of the way, they've all said, yes, how can we help? How can we do something differently? And especially for some folks who, because of having to work remotely, at least initially, we were, working to try to get the technology up and running. Folks said, I can't do what I've been hired to do right now. I want to do something else. And so they've stepped up. And another example is folks who've stepped up to help with food distribution and working with the food bank. It's really great to see. I think the mayor mentioned earlier how many of our employees come out to volunteer and provide some assistance on those days. And I've been impressed at every stage of this pandemic of how well our staff has responded to it. And in addition, we thank you all as council members for your support. And it means a lot to them to hear those positive words. So thank you.
Mr. Parker?
I wanted to second the notion of making sure that we put as much of this funding into human services and directly impacting people as possible. And I guess if I'm remembering correctly, we can change these allocations down the line, right? So we can vote
Absolutely.
on what's before us tonight and still have, without trying to fiddle with it, and know that over the next weeks, you will have the ability to make the changes necessary to do that, right?
Absolutely. And I know there's been a lot of focus on the public information part. I would highlight to council that a portion of that money is for security, to provide more secure access through Zoom and that type of thing for these types of meetings. And it's something that's really important for us to shore up. And beyond that, I think this is a good opportunity to talk to council about the quality of the broadcast. I know that was a concern for council, especially early on. If that's something that council feels we can wait on, then that's certainly something we can consider. I will say, as I said a few moments ago, right now we feel as though we have some other alternatives for providing rental assistance, and so we wouldn't necessarily have to tap into this funding, but maybe we could hold off on it for a little while to see how that pans out, and we can delay the purchase of the equipment to improve the high definition, and wait to see how things pan out with the rental assistance. But yes, if council is comfortable, we would certainly hold off on some of those expenditures until we know more about what the need is on the housing side.
Maurice, can you tell us what kind of pots, like a basic amount from CDBG or other pots for rental? Because it may far exceed the expense of I know we can't pull from other pots for the technology equipment, but can you give us a rough guess? Because it looks, I want to make sure that we're having enough money to help. And
sure. I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, I believe, that we might be able to tap into. I'd hate to put her on the spot. I know Lauren Clark is on the broadcast, and so she may have more specifics than I do at this point, and more details. If Lauren is listening, she may not even be at the computer right now. But
maybe, I think it's unfair to put her on the spot, but I agree with Mr. Parker. We could pass this with the caveat that you'll update us about other pots of money and what you hear the needs are. Absolutely. And that you will let us know your recommendation for how to move forward with either the video equipment, or that you're going to hold off for a bit and tell us that you got other CDBG money and it's meeting the needs, so that you can update us this summer with a report on that. If that would be helpful.
We certainly can.
Okay. Mr. Boynton?
Yep. So I just had a quick question about if this is related to the eligible expenses for the CARES Act funding. I'm just wondering, on the flip side, are there things that the money absolutely cannot be used for, ineligible uses?
I would imagine it's a pretty long list. John, I don't know if you have some specifics that you may want to highlight, but I do know that it cannot be used to cover shortfalls, I believe, budget shortfalls. It has to be used for things that are specific to responding to COVID and the situations that we're in. But I do know that you cannot use it to cover a shortfall. If we we're running a deficit for this current fiscal year that we're in, we can't use that to cover it. John, is there anything else that you can think of off the top of your head that would be a common potential expense that we cannot use it for?
You thought of the one that I thought of too. That's I think you covered it.
Thank you.
All right, I bring this back to council.
I'll move 06, right?
I think so.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Nguyen. Any more comments that haven't been expressed before? All right, roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Weinstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And Mayor says aye as well. Thank you, John. And I know this wasn't in your list of job responsibilities before either. So people are stepping up to the plate, and we appreciate all that all of our staff are doing, and they show how much they care. I mean, literally almost every department director was out there today with the food again. And I also be remiss if I didn't say a big thank you Debbie Horowitz and her entire porch crew. They have been volunteering to help coordinate all this. They gave us plenty of warning that that would only last to the end of June. And so we've had staff members from Parks and Rec and other places step up to help figure out the coordination of all this. But we are very, very grateful for our community partners in helping us all get through this in so many different ways. And if people are willing to donate, I've heard people that wanted to donate their stimulus money, or they wanted to donate something towards helping people not have utilities disconnected, which can't happen just yet, but we're hopeful not ever, or evictions. We have a fund and you can contribute to that fund. I think there's information on our website, Maurice, is that accurate?
There is, yes, ma'am.
Okay. On our fund. We welcome those donations and helping families get through this difficult time. So we appreciate that. Mr. Nguyen?
A quick question on the eviction. So families facing evictions, how do they apply to the fund? I had a few people reach out about that the other day.
There's information on our website about that, how folks can do that, and we can send it out to council. I know we've also done media on it, social media and press releases, but we can send it out to council so that when you are contacted directly by a person, you can provide that information to them, but it is also on our website.
Is it the same thing as because I believe two of the people that reached out to me, they said they tried to go on our website and it took them to the county helpline. Is that the same thing?
The county helpline will get them to we'll get them to the application. Absolutely.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to item number 13, please, which is consider an application for conditional zoning at Weaver's Grove, 7516 Sunrise Road, proposed. I need to read a statement that our attorney helped craft, so hang on for just a minute. The public hearing for the application was held remotely at the Town Council's remote meeting on June 10th. As required by the recently enacted state law authorizing remote hearings, public comment was accepted for an additional 24 hours after the June 10th hearing. The public hearing is now closed. However, the council has continued to receive public comments by email since the public hearing ended. And because the council, our council, has a longstanding policy of permitting public comment on any matter on the agenda, even if there's no required public hearing or even if the public hearing has been concluded, I am recommending that the council permit further limited public comment this evening. And I want to note that the council is not reopening the formal public hearing on this application, and that the council may make final action on this application tonight without having to wait another 24-hour waiting period. Because we have some people signed up to speak, I recommend that we allow them to speak this evening, if that's an agreement with council. Get some shaking of heads. Okay, thank you very much. We know these times are different and virtual meetings make it different, and that we have to comply with state law. Our normal policy is to hold 2 public hearings where we allow comment at both times, but that's not the way it works this way now. But we are open to hearing public comment from people who have signed up to speak. All right, who is presenting tonight on this one?
I'll be presenting. Can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. My name is Becky McDonald. I'm with the Planning Department. Tonight we have the application for conditional zoning at 7516 Sunrise Road, also known as the Weaver's Grove Development. I have 8 slides. I'll take just about 5 minutes. So as the mayor mentioned, the public hearing on this item was closed on June 11th. So tonight our recommendation to you is to adopt the resolution of the land use plan amendment, adopt the resolution of consistency, and then adopt the revised ordinance A, which that contains some recently revised stipulations that were shared with you this afternoon. I'll go through those in just a moment. But first, here's an overview of the process, just to remind you all. Town staff reviewed the application for compliance with our ordinance. We brought it to our advisory boards and commissions and received their recommendations. The public hearing was held on June 11th or June 10th and closed on June 11th. And then discussion and action has been scheduled for your meeting tonight. And to remind you all about this site and the project, it's located on Sunrise Road on the northern edge of the town's limits. So you can see I-40 running on the top right corner of your screen. Sunrise Road is over here on the left. The applicant, Habitat for Humanity, is proposing a residential community with an emphasis on affordable housing. There's a small neighborhood commercial center in the center of the site and several different community amenities throughout. The site would be rezoned from residential 2 to residential 6 conditional zoning and neighborhood commercial conditional zoning to allow this project. And I just wanted to touch on an issue that's been of interest and point out the location of the proposed berm that the developer has proposed to reduce noise from I-40. It's along here, running along I-40. The berm would be extended also offsite as well to provide some additional noise protection to Weaver's Grove and the adjacent properties. There's been some discussion on the issue of noise, and we definitely recognize that this is a very complicated issue. The LUMO, the Land Use Management Ordinance, does not regulate noise, so we can't review it from a staff perspective. However, the North Carolina Department of Transportation states that noise reduction measures should be considered over 66 decibel level. However, in this case, the Department of Transportation will not be providing any noise barriers because this project hasn't yet received building permits. And in their evaluation for the widening of I-40, it doesn't meet the criteria for additional noise barriers. So recognizing this, the developer has proposed this earth berm, and according to the Federal Highway Administration, depending on the placement of the berm and the construction, they can provide noise reduction of up to 15 decibels. And the developer has provided a bit of additional information on the berm. We've also included a new stipulation regarding the construction and planting of the berm that I will go over in a moment as well. So there's been a few additional updates since the public hearing. We have included all public comments that were received after the end of the meeting on June 10th while the public hearing was still open. Those are in your packet. We also received some council questions, and we have included answers to those from both the developer and staff in your technical report, and those are specifically on noise and stormwater issues. We also have included several new stipulations in response to those council questions. And then finally, the email that you received today included 3 additional stipulations that have been revised. And so I'll go through those quickly and give you an overview of some of those changes and the new stipulations. So there were 6 new ones that have been added in the revised Ordinance A. So the first, we're going to require that plans are provided that detail the drainage and grading for each dwelling and building. So ensure that there's proper drainage and no ponding of water. We've also, as I mentioned before, we've included a stipulation to clarify some details about how the berm must be constructed and planted to maximize its noise reduction. We have also added a requirement for a geotechnical engineer to certify the foundation design for any buildings that are proposed to be built where an existing ephemeral stream is currently located on the site. The 4th stipulation is expanding the capacity of the sediment basins. Those are now designed, or were designed for 10-year, 24-hour storms. They have been upgraded to 25-year, 24-hour storm events. The 5th new stipulation is also requiring that a geotechnical engineer also certify that the site is suitable for development based on the groundwater table level. And then the last new stipulation is requiring a weekly walkthrough with town and Orange County erosion control staff and to inspect the erosion control devices and make sure there's no issues going on there. And so this is just a snapshot of the email that you received today with those 3 most recently revised stipulations after some conversations with our stormwater staff and the developer. So the first revision builds in a little bit of additional flexibility in terms of the site layout, depending on the results of the geotechnical engineer's report. So that anything that he finds about the ephemeral stream, any issues that it could cause for any of the buildings near or on it, this revision would allow some small changes to the site layout to be approved administratively. It wouldn't impact the overall number of units that are allowed or the limits of disturbance or any other environmental issues, but it would allow a little bit more flexibility to mitigate some of those issues if they come up. The second revision is just updating the timing for the performance bond as requested by the applicant and agreed to by the staff. And then the last revision clarifies one of those new stipulations from the previous slide about the erosion control inspections, and just adds in that any issues that are identified during those weekly walks, they need to be addressed within 2 weeks. So again, our recommendation tonight is to adopt the resolution of land use plan amendment and the resolution of consistency, and then enact revised ordinance A. So I can answer questions. I know the applicant, the developer is also here with some additional thoughts.
Thank you. Are there clarifying questions from council for our staff? Ms. Ryan and Ms. Stegman?
You were talking about the berm and the possible decibel reductions from that. Is that, was the number that you threw out a number from the actual design of the proposed berm, or is that a general expectation from a berm or possibilities?
It's just a study, or it was from the Federal Highway Administration, just stating what the possibility that a berm could do if designed in the right way, if you know, different heights are as they would design it to the maximum noise reduction capability. So it's not for this particular berm. The developer does have some additional information. I think that they provided some height information in their response, and I know that they can speak a little bit more to that as well. So
thank you.
Stegman?
This may be in the materials that were sent out this afternoon. I didn't see them, but I wanted to just ask about the requirement for a weekly walkthrough around the erosion inspection. How does, is that for the entire, I mean, this development could be over 10 years, 5 years. Are we committing our staff to doing that weekly for years on end, or what's the parameters of that?
So I know that they've been doing a similar type of walkthrough with Chandler Woods, and it would be during active construction. So whatever phase is currently under construction, they would just go through those erosion control, anything that's being used in that construction area at the time. They would just be going through and making sure that all those are functioning. So.
Okay, so I guess presumably staff have, feel like this is a reasonable request. It just sounds like a lot of staff time. So I know our staff are stretched. So I just wanted to on that.
I think it's something that stormwater staff was happy and requested to do. It ensures a lot more, trust with what's going on at the site and being able to keep up to date on any issues that are going on out there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, do we want to hear from the applicant?
So we do not have a formal presentation or comment tonight, but we are available for any questions.
Thank you. Council members, any questions of the applicant? Mr. Parker, then Ms. Ryan.
Yeah, I just wanted to check in. There's, seems to be a bunch of new stipulations. I just wanted to check in and see what the applicant's position was on those stipulations.
Well, I will allow Bruce to jump in here in the sense that he has more experience with this than I do. But my understanding is that most of the stipulations we talked through with the staff are items that would normally be covered and included and would not be a burden to us as we go through the process. But Bruce, feel free to add in.
That's correct, Jennifer and Councilmember Parker. We are satisfied with the additional stipulations that Becky read to you earlier.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Ryan?
Becky said you would give us some more information about the berm and the noise mitigations.
Well, what we have responded back to staff is that the grades that are shown on the conditional zoning application, the berm is higher than I-40 in all locations along the top of the berm. The only place that's not the case is on either end, the east and west, where it transitions back down to existing grade. But we have met internally and come up with some ideas of how to make it even taller. And the key, according to the Federal Highway Administration document, is that an earth berm, to be effective enough to reduce the decibel level by 15, needs to block line of sight from a resident in their residence looking out at a vehicle on a nearby highway. And so that is our goal. We believe we meet that as the grades currently show, but we also are going to study that during ZCP phase and see if we can make the berm even taller. And as you probably have noticed, we also have an extensive replanting of that berm. And again, according to the Federal Highway Administration, the combination of the berm and the plantings are important in reducing that noise.
Thank you.
I might mention one other thing. If you recall, on our master plan, we did not extend this berm within the 100-foot I-40 bumper all the way to our property line on the east. But that is another way of improving the sound barrier between our residences and I-40. And we're glad to do that. We just didn't happen to have shown it that way on the application plan. But if we're all searching for ways to improve this noise barrier, that's a simple way to do it. Okay. And you might just leave that in the hands of the staff. We're according to, if you read these stipulations that Becky read, there's a number of things that we need to work with the staff on during the beginning phases of the zoning compliance permit phase. And that could be another one that we could talk to them about if you would authorize them to consider that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, we have members of the public signed up to speak. Welcome public comment, as we said, and we're asking everyone to stay within the 3-minute limit, please. And Mr. Parker will call you in first and second person.
Nancy Oates, followed by Abby Zarkin.
Okay. I think it takes a while to become a panelist. And I was not expecting to be first. I thought maybe I would just say that I would agree with the other speakers. But given that I am first, Weaver's Grove is going to double the supply of the Habitat homes in Orange County. And that is really exciting news. And perhaps that's why with all this excitement around supply, some important points are being brushed aside. For a successful community, the subsidized units need to be interspersed with the market rate ones. One where your address won't stigmatize you on job applications. Certainly, you can go ahead and make different neighborhoods by housing type, but please intersperse the subsidized and market rate units in each housing type. It's kind of like when you're on an airplane. The person in the seat next to you might have paid half the price you did or twice the price you did, but it's not apparent who paid what. And interspersing the units also makes the market rate units less attractive to investors who might come in and snap up the middle class housing and turn it into rentals. Because the idea for Weaver's Grove is to provide home ownership opportunities for families in a range of incomes. The current design segregates out the market rate from the subsidized, and this creates a social justice issue because likely there will be a higher percentage of buyers of color for the subsidized units than the market rates ones. And Boulder, Colorado's Housing Authority created a nationally known successful mixed income community. It was called the Holiday Neighborhood, and they're happy to help Habitat or any town staff or anyone else figure out how to make this work. It'll take Habitat a while to raise the $25 million in this economy. That's a lot of money. So there's plenty of time for Habitat to figure out how to make this a truly mixed income community. My second concern is the flooding issue. I realize that you're strengthening some of the flooding concerns, the stormwater concerns, but the subsidized units are sited on marshy ground, and even homes built to code are going to experience flooding because the town's engineering standards aren't designed for cluster communities and the poor quality of soil in Chapel Hill. And I have personal experience with that in the community, the cluster community that I live in. And I have to say I have the highest praise for town staff working to find solutions to the stormwater problem. But the solutions are expensive and they're borne by the homeowner. And I don't want a home buyer of modest income to have to struggle with that kind of added expense. And then finally, there's the issue of living closer to I-40 than any other neighborhood in town. And with NCDOT is going to install noise mitigation on all of the other neighborhoods that have already been built, but Weaver's Grove doesn't qualify, as you pointed out. And it'll be the only neighborhood exposed to that level of noise. 2 weeks ago, the community turned out in force to object to people of color being treated as less than, and this is an example of what they're talking about. So you as council have the ability to fix this, and I hope you will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Abby Zarkin, followed by Michael Murphy.
Thank you very much. I live in Chandler's Green and in an adjacent community, and I'm also the president of Chandler's Green's HOA. I have to say that I still love what Habitat's trying to do, and my concerns are to make the project successful and safe for all of its residents. I have to also say that I appreciate so much what the town has done to explore the noise issue specifically, and has added some stipulations about the sound berm as well as landscaping, the berm. And I do hope it helps with the Weaver's Grove residents and the noise exposure to them, as well as to my own neighbors here in Chandler's Green to some extent, but I don't think that it's quite enough. What we still need to see, I think, is specific language that addresses what the berm will accomplish with regard to noise explicitly inside the stipulations. Councilwoman Gu mentioned, and I really appreciate what you had said earlier, and I couldn't agree more about the importance of first do no harm. I realize that the town doesn't include sound standards in its land use ordinances now, but we also know now that some of these affordable homes will be subjected to unhealthy noise. And we don't really know what the proposed berm will be effective in cutting down that noise to healthy levels. We've heard quotes from the NCDOT's documentation. We've heard that designs could achieve certain decibel reductions, but we've still not heard from the developer a specific commitment to reducing the high unhealthy noise levels down to a healthy level for its residents, and then the ramifications to my neighborhood as well. 12 years ago, and I want to remind you all, the council then as well as Habitat were aware of the unsafe noise levels on this same parcel of land with homes along the highway. And they had agreed to not build in those unsafe noise zones. Now, I appreciate we have the possibility of a berm, but the berm per se, with all the lovely descriptions that the developer describes of planting it, and those are all positive steps, and I appreciate it, but it's still not enough. We need to conduct a sound study. We need to specify what the berm has to accomplish in the language of the conditions so that we can be assured that the residents of Weaver's Grove will live safely and comfortably. Otherwise, as I see it, it's really just lip service. So let me pose this. What happens when the people move into Weaver's Grove and the noise levels are still unsafe? Who's going to fix that? What happens when the highway is widened and even more homes are exposed to unsafe noise levels? Who's going to fix it then? And what happens when the noise emanating from the widened highway is funneled directly into my neighbors' backyards because no one required the coordination of this habitat berm with future DOT sound walls? Who's going to fix it then? I also say that the staff report—
your time is up.
I'll just comment one more time. I wasn't allowed my time 2 weeks ago, and I just have a moment left. I'm wrapping it up. But the staff report says that to attenuate noise up to 15 decibels, the berm has to meet criteria, and they say that this berm may meet the criteria. I think it's crucial that the staff add that it must meet this criteria. Make it a condition of your approval so that we can hold Habitat's developer accountable to achieve it. Let's remember, first, do no harm. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michael Murphy, followed by Anna Richards.
Hello. Abby said a lot of what I was planning to say, but let me clarify, because there are a couple of situations that we're looking at when we're talking about noise in a berm. One is the noise for the Weaver's Grove residents, and a berm may or may not reduce it in an adequate fashion. What Abby pointed out is the developer has been completely unwilling to set any standards. Throwing up a number of 15 dB may be achievable in some circumstances, is actually quite misleading, because if you look at the wall that DOT is proposing to build for the Chandler's Green residents, that produces an average of 4.5 dB. It is right on the freeway, which is a much better design. And they're not coming close to 15 dB. So the likelihood is the berm won't come close to 15 dB either. Berms produce less sound attenuation than walls do, because they're sloped and the sound actually walks over the wall. The other problem is since it's in closer, then the sound wall will be built. As Abby points out, the berm will essentially just shunt the sound into the neighbor's property and make the sound for the Chandler's Green neighbors worse. So there needs to be some level of coordination. There might be a solution here, but I don't see a commitment for enough level of coordination that we could have a solution. And then the other problem has been pointed to, bringing in an engineer to make sure that the houses built on top of the stream protect the houses doesn't necessarily protect the Chandler's Green residents downstream. And we need to do more work to protect that. The proper solution would just be to not build those 3 houses. 3 units aren't that critical to the overall size of this development. Get rid of those 3 units, you wouldn't have any on top of the stream. So it's less than 2% of the overall number of houses. So anyway, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, Anna Richards, followed by Donna Bell.
Hi, I'm back. I'm still here. Mayor and council. I just came back because I was here a few weeks ago when this was first proposed, and it seems to me that there are a number of stipulations that have been added to the project. And since I was here last, I think one of the concern that came up then that I thought a lot about is the composition of the neighborhood itself. And I think there are legitimate concerns about how neighborhoods are constructed and where houses are placed. Even with those concerns, though, I still come tonight hoping that you will approve this project and that Habitat and the developer will work to make sure that we have an equitable distribution of the types of housing within the units. I think those are legitimate concerns, and we don't want to create segregated areas with certain kinds of housing within this wonderful opportunity for affordable housing in our community. So I'm still supporting it, and I hope that the council moves forward with this plan, and that for me, the concerns are more around what constitutes those neighborhoods, and we'll work through the other issues. So I strongly urge that we take advantage of this opportunity. It's one of the last developable areas in our town, and we have a commitment to build a large number of affordable housing. And I just hope that we move forward as a town and approve this. And I would also hope that Habitat and the developer work to make sure that we have a good distribution of the housing within the development. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and Donna Bell,
Hey.
two alumni
Good evening,
tonight.
everyone.
She's missing us on a Wednesday night.
Oh my God. So I actually didn't have the chops to stay up with y'all last time. I've lost my endurance. But I did want to come. I'm going to take Ralph's declaration to know that I cannot change anyone's mind this evening. I do want to say that I'm happy that this is finally coming to a vote. I think that this has been long coming, not only with this council, but the one before that, and the ones that were talking about this 10, 15 years ago. I know that you will all be thoughtful and think about the affordable housing needs that we have in this community, and what a good partner that Habitat Humanity has been for us in producing these resources for a community in a moment when we're thinking a lot about how do we create more resources and more stability and more security for our citizens. So I will keep watching and to see how this all ends, but I wish you all luck. And I hope that it comes to a decision that you'll support this project.
Thank you.
I do not see anyone else. No hands raised, no one else has signed up.
Great, thank you. Nope, got two participants raising hands.
Oh, okay. Just last second there. Douglas Call, followed by Danny Benjamin.
I just did what it told me to.
We're ready for you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Please proceed.
As so often happens when you're ready to talk, other people have said all of the good things. So instead, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Doug Call. I'm long-term Habitat volunteer. About 7 years or so. The last 2 years I've been on the board and chairman of the advocacy committee. So I've met you in many capacities related to advocacy work for Habitat. As I was thinking about this, as everyone was talking, listening to all the details about sound suppression and managing water, etc., these are all extremely important. But the one thing that I didn't hear tonight, and I did want to spend a little bit of time on, and that is really social justice, equity. We need to move forward to get as many people into these homes as we can. There are so many people now that have never had the opportunity for the promise of America, if you will. And a couple of days ago, I was reading some words from Jimmy Carter, President Carter, who wrote that we really can't be concerned about changing the world. Instead, what we need to do is change the individual, change the life of as many people as you can. And if you do it positively, they're going to go out and change the lives of the others that they interact with. So let's be optimistic, altruistic that 100 families will move in here in the next 5 years or so into the Habitat homes, regardless of what part of the land they end up setting on. There'll be 235 other families moving in, market rate homes wherever they end up. The children are going to be playing together. The families are going to be walking the same walks, talking to each other, and maybe changing some attitudes about what our community really is. And as Jimmy Carter said, you can't change the world this way, but it's a fine start. So approving this is a fine start. And certainly Chapel Hill has a tradition of making many fine starts on issues producing commendable change. So I think we should continue this Tar Heel tradition by voting to approve the conditional zoning request for Weavers Grove.
Thank you.
Thank you. Danny Benjamin, and so far, no one else has raised their hand.
Hey, thank you so much, Mr. Parker, and to the rest of the town council for being of service to the community. So my comments are twofold. First of all, I was pleased to hear the importance recognized by town staff and by the applicant, the importance of vegetation as a sound barrier. And I'm pleased to see that that importance is recognized in their discussion of the proposed berm. One of the things that we've said repeatedly over the past 18 months with this application is that prior to approval, a sound study is warranted for this property so that because sound is a very complex, and the impact of sound is a very complex phenomenon around wave phenomena. And if the town council members and staff have read the 2005, 2003, 2005 sound study, you'll see that efforts that you make to put in a berm or a wall sometimes make life and sound better for property owners, and sometimes it makes it worse because of the way sound waves travel from the highway to the adjacent communities. And folks with real good intentions about putting up berms or sound walls can make it worse for the folks who are going to move in and folks who currently live there. And it's my request, again, once again, because this proposed berm has the impact, potential to impact for better or for worse, both the new neighbors and the current residents, that number one, such a study be done prior to approval, and certainly prior to any breaking down. And number two, thank you. Number two, that the applicant have a target of reducing the sound to what's acceptable by federal authorities, be it HUD or NC DOT guidance, around the 66 decibel line. And number three, that any berm put in place have noise neutral for the current residents. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, that appears to be everyone.
All right, I bring this back to council. Are there comments or next steps for council? Ms. Ryan?
So I've been talking to staff over the past few weeks about the noise issues and the stormwater issues. And I want to thank everybody who worked together to get the new stipulations in. I think that they will be helpful to address some of the neighbors' concerns and to help make this a better project. So I thank everybody involved in that. The noise, I think there's two concerns we're hearing. One is the berm going to achieve what it is supposed to do for the Habitat residents, and is it going to negatively impact the Chandler's Green residents? So I would encourage everybody to work together during the design phase for the berm. First of all, to make sure that it's really going to achieve meaningful noise reduction for those, for the adjacent houses in Weaver's Grove, and preferably below that 67 decibel level, and hopefully even more. 67 decibels is still pretty loud. So I'd love to see everybody work together with that as the goal. And again, without making the noise worse over in Chandler's Green, to work with them and whoever DOT is, whenever they eventually start to build that wall. I'm very happy that there's provisions in here to allow land use flexibility. I think especially as you get more into the engineering, with the concerns of those buildings that are over the ephemeral stream, I would really like the applicant to have the ability to move things around so that they can accommodate those kind of things and improve the site design. So yeah, so I think I support the project. I'm glad that they've got these new stipulations in place, and hope that they'll all work forward to address these concerns fully during the design and construction phase. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson?
Well, thankfully, I'm not as tired this time as I was last time, so I might be able to put words together. But I really am so excited about this project. I feel like it's something that we need more of. We have other exciting affordable housing and missing middle projects on the horizon, but this is going to be really huge. I agree. I think that it's great to have that flexibility in there so that if there can be some movement within the site plan, so if things could get stacked a little bit in the middle, get them off the sides, if that can make the project better, I think that's great. I agree, figuring out how to work together on the noise mitigation will be important, just like any other project where working with new neighbors and existing neighbors always gets us to better places. But I really just want to thank the staff, the neighbors, Habitat, everybody for coming together, for making comments that have made the project better. And I'm just really thrilled. I know it's going to take some time, but I'm really excited to see those units start to come online. So thank you.
Okay, Mr. Parker, then Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, I am just really excited and thankful that we have partners like Habitat for Humanity who are willing to invest in our community and help make it a better place for all of folks. I think we know that it's very important, obviously, to create affordable housing for the folks who need it, and and to give them an ownership opportunity. But we also know that people who live near these communities do better. Diversity helps everybody. It doesn't just help folks who are at the lower end of the economic scale. It helps everybody. And so I'm just really excited about the way this project is shaking out. I think Habitat has worked really hard to work with the neighbors to come up with solutions that will mitigate the problems. I think they've, their willingness to make the changes suggested in the most recent round of stipulations is nothing but a positive. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm really interested in getting things done at scale. And so when I see 100 affordable units coming into our market, I mean, those are the kinds of things that have at least the hope of making a dent in our huge affordable housing problem. So I just want to thank Habitat, thank our staff for working real hard with them to bring this to what I hope is a successful conclusion tonight. And I look forward to voting for it.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yeah, same stuff. Really support the project. Think all this is great. Habitat has gone above and beyond at every step. And I just want to reaffirm Ms. Richards' words earlier and encourage Habitat to work with her to make sure to address some of those equity concerns. And if anyone else has no comments, I'd love to move I think it's 3 resolutions. So the first of the 3.
Yeah, we still have some more comments to go, but I can come back for you for that. Ms. Gu?
Well, I think I just want to echo my council colleagues about this is a great opportunity that I think that we all acknowledge the needs for affordable housing, for housing diversity. I think we all agree with that. But from my own medical research, I have seen a lot of research, the studies that trying to understand the impact of highway noise and highway pollution on the low-income community. And I have seen the data after data that has shown that the long-term damage actually is well established. So I refuse to say that in order to get to the number of units that we have to sacrifice the health of the residents, even though it's affordable housing. I think that it's equally important for us to make sure that the health of the residents in our Habitat for Humanity community has been protected. So I do want to make sure that those berms that can actually work. I actually spent some time trying to study that how to make sure that works. I think it's a very complicated situation, and there's a lot of uncertainties in it. I think probably it cannot be like 100% certainty to say whether or not we can maintain that the burn is going to work or it's not going to work. So I'm urging both the developer and the Habitat for Humanity will put the residents' interest at the heart and the top priority for this project. The number of units, of course, is important. The scale of the project is important, but ultimately we're talking about the people who's going to live in those houses and their children, and they're going to they will become elderly, and the cumulative health damage on those people are real. It's well established. So I think that we need to consider the situations and probably be more open-minded and try to collecting data when the project is going on to make sure that the health and the interest of the residents in the community is well protected. So if we can put in this hard commitment, say we're going to make sure this noise level is maintained or controlled at a certain level, we're committed to that. I think I will be a lot more assured to feel that the interests of those residents are protected. I do not want to see another public health study to show that those the residents in those low-income communities become another statistics. I think it's just heartbreaking to see that happening. I'm glad to see the flexibility the developer has shown in the last few weeks. I think that there are a significant improvement. So I appreciate that. I think we need to continue this work to make sure that even though it's a affordable housing project, I think the scale is important, but the long-term health impact of the residents in those communities is equally important as well. So I think I'm hoping to see some hard commitment to say we are going to maintain the voice level, the noise level under a certain degree.
All right, I'm going to share a few comments. I really believe in the habitat model. It helps break the cycle of poverty for so many families. There's great data worldwide showing all the good work that that does in establishing stability for families for generations to come. I understand that we have a lot of parcels. The remaining parcels that can be developed in Chapel Hill have a lot of different challenges. I don't know if any of you have been over to our DHIC senior living. It's right up against 15501. You cannot hear it from inside. There's going to be many challenges with the parcels that we have that we're trying to create affordable housing to have more people, but there are workable solutions. I'm also going to call council's attention to the fact that this was one of our first conditional zoning processes for residential. I think it really shows that we were able to have good community back and forth with staff, with the applicant, with trying to make this a better proposal and crafting the pieces in there that we weren't afforded during the SUP process. And so I really like this model of being able to get community input, work with the developer to listen and respond, and the flexibility of the proposal now with the stipulations and being able to move units or change design a little bit with the overall aspect, I think is really the way forward for our community to get more affordable housing, to figure out how to work with the environmental situation and the constraints of this particular parcel. So we're eager to learn more. I agree with Ms. Gu, we need to learn more about noise pollution and its effect on a community. And we're going to continue have our staff continue to work with the applicant to figure out, because I know they have the peoples who are going to live their best interests at heart as well. So a lot going on. All right, we have 3 motions that will be needed for this item if you choose to move so. The first, I believe, is a resolution plan of the land use plan amendment.
So moved.
Second.
Woo, moved by Mr. Nguyen, seconded Ms. Stegman. I'll go. I didn't saw a hand. I hear the noise. Okay. Any more comments that haven't been shared? Go with a roll call vote again, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boincy.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu. Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Y'all move boxes. I'm going to find you all over there. Okay. We have a second motion.
I move consistently with the land use, with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Boincy. Any comments that haven't been shared so far? All right, roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boincy.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well. Motion is unanimous. Sorry, there we go.
Move ordinance A.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Anderson. Any
And
comment?
that includes the revised stipulations that were sent out.
Sorry, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Parker, that includes the revised
Yes,
stipulation.
with all revised stipulations.
Ms. Anderson, acceptable as a
Second.
second. Thank you. Thank you, Ralph. Any other comments that haven't been shared? All right, roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boincy.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well. Motion is unanimous. Thank you very much. And we thank you for all the people that participated in this process and for the staff work. And we look forward to hearing updates as this project moves along. Okay. That moves us to item number 14. I have a statement again from our attorney, Mr. Carpenos, because we are actually having to close this public hearing because we don't have a date certain for economic development agreement, because we're not in a place to have that yet. So let me read you the statement. My papers here, you're just gonna have to bear with me. All right, here we go. The council is being asked tonight to take these items off the council's agenda for now. We are continuing to work on this important economic development initiative, including the new parking deck and office development with laboratory wet lab space in the 100 block of East Rosemary Street. However, the proposed economic development agreement and rezoning application are not ready at this time to bring forth to a public hearing. We will be working on getting these items ready for public consideration and re-advertise both the proposed agreement and the rezoning application for public hearings when we're able to present them for public consideration. And we do not have a date certain for you on that at this point, but we do have to have a motion to close the public hearing. But first, we need to make sure if there's any clarifying questions and if there's anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item. Are there any clarifying questions? Ms. Gu?
I'm not 100% sure that we are closing the public hearing on this item with this.
Because
okay.
we don't have a date certain to move it to. We could move it to September 9th, but we don't know that we'll be ready. So for this point, we're just going to close it. We'll reopen it and renotice it when we have a date certain.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll move we close the
Oh,
public
wait,
hearing.
anybody from the public who wishes to comment on this item?
There is not.
Okay, now we come back. Ms. Anderson, what were you going to say?
I was going to say I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, moved by Ms. Anderson, second by Mr. Parker. Any comments that haven't been shared? You didn't get to share any comments, sorry. I hope we'll be back to you. We've had some good discussions, but we're not ready to bring, and we want to be transparent and bring it forward to the public. We're just not at that point right now. And I know you've worked hard on this item. So, all right, take a roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boyncey.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. So that motion is unanimous. Thank you very much. Now I move you to appointments. I know this is a different way of doing appointments. And as we shared out with you, we were trying to only do appointments where we had significant openings on certain boards. We didn't want to open up the whole process and move people from existing boards, creating more holes. So we were trying to work within the realm of that, knowing that we've asked our board members, advisory board members, to stay on their boards till the fall. We will come back to this, but for now we wanted to make sure, since there were some applicants and there were some, like I said, significant holes out there. And because of the new laws, we're going to have to do this differently because you didn't turn a ballot in. Mr. Parker worked with several of you to do the interviews that we do require for some of these boards. So I'm going to let him bring the nominations forward for each of these boards separately, and we'll have a roll call vote on each of these boards. So we'll start, Mr. Parker, with the appointment to the Board of Adjustment, please.
And for the Board of Adjustment, the interview committee recommended Nathan Boucher, or Boucher, I'm not sure, who was actually the only candidate at that time. I move that the council appoint him to the Board of Adjustment.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Anderson. Any discussion at this time? Okay, roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boyncey.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen. I didn't hear you. Did you say aye?
Aye.
All right. Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
All right. Mayor says aye as well. Motion's unanimous. Thank you for that appointment, and thank you for your willingness to serve on our Board of Adjustment. All right, next is the appointments to the Historic District Commission. Mr. Parker.
And we interviewed, let's see, how many we interviewed? 3 people. We are recommending 2 at this time, although there are 3 vacancies. There was 1 candidate who was not available for the interview, and we felt that it would be worth waiting for either that individual or potentially other candidates to emerge. So the 2 candidates that the committee recommended were Josh Gerlitz and Duncan Lascelles. So I move they be appointed to the Historic District Commission.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Anderson. Any discussion on this item? Okay, roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Boyensee,
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen,
Aye.
Councilmember Gu,
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan,
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well, so unanimous. Again, thank you for your willingness to serve. We hope you can get started right away because I know they have a meeting coming up. And just a friendly reminder, anyone watching, we are going to do more board appointments in the fall. This is just to help make sure that people at boards have quorums and have representation that we're looking for. All right, next, Mr. Parker, is the appointment to the Orange Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors.
And there is a standing interview committee for that this year comprised me, Hangbin Gu, and Karen Stegman. We interviewed 3 candidates, all of whom were actually very well qualified, but for reasons having to do with expertise, in particular, one individual's background in public health and in community engagement, and would also contribute to having more diversity on the board. The committee recommended for appointment, and I apologize if I don't get the name quite right, Dini Anyangwe. So I move that the council appoint Dini to the Chapel Hill seat on Owasso.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Mr. Boyensee to make this appointment. Any comments, please? We appreciate Mr. Boyensee you reaching out and helping us find good candidates. All right, roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boyensee.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Makes it unanimous, and thank you for your willingness to serve. We do have another OWASA appointment. We will figure out how to move forward with that as well come this fall, but we were down 2, so we need to make sure. The next one is an appointment to the Durham Chapel Hill Carrboro Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm happy to announce that Mr. Parker received the appointment to represent Go Triangle at the MPO. Which opened up, he was our alternate. I am the designee for the regular spot, which opened up an alternate spot, which gives us 3 Chapel Hill folks at these meetings. Ms. Ryan has volunteered to learn all the technology that goes with this, and she also serves on our transit partners. And then if you are interested in transit, please, we can talk. I'm happy to consider moving folks around. Usually come December, I try to give people some movement on boards to get some more experience. You got to get up to speed. MPO has a lot. They will spend days training you on all the acronyms, which I still don't even have down. So anyway, I will need a motion. I'm not allowed to make motions in a second.
Yeah, I move that the council appoint Amy to fill the Chapel Hill alternate seat on the DCHC MPO.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Anderson. Any discussion? All right. Roll call vote, please, then. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boyensee.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well. The motion is unanimous. Thank you. And Amy, there are pre-meetings to the MPO meetings. We will get you up. We meet the day before with our staff to go over to make sure that we're up to speed on the agenda. So we'll get that information to you. There is no meeting in July, so there'll be first one will be up in August. So that would be great. Thank you for being willing to represent us at those meetings. Going to get to learn a lot about DOT. All right. That is the last of our regular agenda for this evening. I remind council that we start tomorrow morning promptly at 9. We'd like you to log on by 8:45 if you're willing to do that, please, so that we can start our interview process for our attorney candidate. We no longer need to have the closed session for an economic development plan, but I do want to reserve the 7 p.m. time tomorrow evening in case we need it, in addition to what we do in the morning if we're not able to finish, because I know several of you would like to leave at the 12:30 mark to go to the other conversation. So I'm asking that we leave that on the books, but that we can make the decision how we proceed with that, if that's good with everyone. So
I
thank
will
you.
be sending out later this evening or very early tomorrow morning questions for the interviews tomorrow. So that's sort of gotten a little bit backed up, but I will get those will be coming out. So we will have a list of questions that we will be asking, both general questions and candidate specific questions, with each of us assigned to one question.
So with that, I want to say, we know our staff has been working really hard during this time, but you also have been working really hard during this time. I know we have asked a lot of you between all the things going on and an important aspect of hiring a new town attorney. We hope that you will get much needed downtime. We probably will need to have a special meeting at the last week of July to announce whoever our attorney is going to be and to vote officially on that person. It would be a virtual meeting still, just to let you know. But that we're hopeful that we're not having, we give you the much needed downtime to disconnect and reconnect with your own families, because we've been asking a lot of you over the last few months. And we know it's been a lot of work, and we know it's been important work, but it's felt a bit more than usual. Usually June is one of our hardest meeting months, but this one has been really impactful. I'm just going to use that word because it's been an amazing journey, and all that we're hearing from our community, all that we're seeing with COVID. So I appreciate everyone hanging in there and working together. This has been interesting to read nationally. We're seeing people resigning from positions, health directors, managers, council members, mayors. This is a lot to ask people to serve. As we all know, we serve as a part-time capacity. I find that also interesting. So there is a lot going on, and I commend you for the hard work and your willingness to pull together to help our community get through this incredible time. So with that, Mr. Jones, you have anything to share with us? Or Ralph, your last meeting, say anything?
I'll just say something to Ralph so he can have the last word.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that I echo the mayor's comments about the hard work of the council. I appreciate all of your support and your thoughtfulness and your endurance during the last few months. So thank you for that. Get some rest. Now I'll leave it to Ralph.
Well, no, thank you all very much. It's been a wonderful experience for me and our family to be working in Chapel Hill these past many years, and I've enjoyed my work with the council, and I hope to have a chance to thank you all in person this fall when we can get back together. But have a good summer, and we'll be in touch.
Ralph, we plan on honoring you, so thank you. And please note, yeah. Oh, I like that. Okay, there we go. All right, and this is not goodbye. And Ralph has agreed to stay on for transition, so we don't actually have a firm finishing date, but he's been very willing to help onboard whoever we select. So we hope we'll have that done shortly. Anyway, that is the end of our meeting. I don't have a gavel at home, so thank you all, and I will see you bright and early in the morning.
Okay.
Bye.
Night,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Night.
Good night, Mayor.
Good night, Sabrina.